Chapter 365. In the noisy banquet hall, while the students held their plates and focused their attention on the envelopes slowly falling from the sky, the black-haired Her Royal Highness had quietly approached her target. Looking at the sweet cake on the fork in front of him, the black-haired young man was shocked. He didn't expect that Lillian would dare to do this after returning to the academy. It was the clear will of Emperor Lucas to forbid Lillian from contacting the members of the Akkad family. Although it was still unknown why His Majesty issued this ban, there was no doubt that Lillian, as the Royal Highness, had to abide by it. At least, she couldn't take the initiative to contact them too obviously, let alone this kind of behavior that would expose her intimate relationship. Luo Ye, who was aware of Lillian's intention, was about to refuse, but before he finished speaking, Paul Aikman suddenly walked over. The young man held the plate and blocked the scene of the two making contact. Luo Ye was stunned for a while. Listening to Lillian's urging and looking at Paul's back, Luo Ye was stunned for a while. Worried that others would see him, he could only lean over and suck Lillian's fork in his mouth, then quickly return to his original position. As for the black-haired girl, she walked past the young man as if nothing had happened. The two just brushed past each other as if nothing had happened. Seeing that no one noticed Lillian's behavior, the black-haired young man breathed a sigh of relief, but when he turned his head to look at the girl leaving, he couldn't help blushing. Sure enough. Sister Royal should still be with Brother Luo Ye. Paul, I hope you can help me maintain the basic contact with Luo Ye in the academy. The ace agent of the Luo Ye x Lillian fan club, Paul Aikman, encouraged himself in his heart, thinking about how to create good results in the future. On the other hand, Nuair and Xia Luo were gnashing their teeth. Damn it. That woman actually found such a helper by Luo Ye's side. How despicable! Although Luo Ye had a good temper, it wasn't that he couldn't get angry. In fact, he was usually very dignified. The last time the three girls fought in rows, they stopped because they were afraid that he would be angry. It was only when he was younger that the girls dared to do whatever they wanted. Why is it suddenly so cold? Favorability plus 80, plus 50, plus 20, plus 40, plus 110. Once upon a time, Luo Ye had looked down on things like favorability points. After all, favorability points were different from things that could make one stronger after exchanging for gold coins. It seemed that favorability points were only useful for developing territories. However, after experiencing the battle with the Saint Heroes Society and the dispute between the girls, a divine artifact had changed Luo Ye's perception. In this award ceremony, the actions of Luo Ye and the other two were made known to the public. After knowing what they had done to punish evil and promote good, the students in the audience naturally felt admiration, approval, and other emotions. And after seeing Luo Ye receive the award, they yearned for it and yearned for it. Director, thank you. No, I should be the one thanking you. In the end, this is the result of everyone's hard work. Chapter 366. Half a month ago, not long after Luo Ye's body recovered, a familiar yet special experience made him relive the nightmare that he had almost forgotten. That was the second time he saw that pair of beautiful but cold eyes after a year. When that pair of eyes looked at him across time and space, Luo Ye's body turned cold and his heart seemed to stop. He only woke up when she left. Of course, there was no such thing as love or hatred for no reason in this world. Luo Ye wasn't surprised that he was targeted by the Mother Goddess. After all, it was because he had absorbed the power of the oracles. However, it had to be said that being watched by the gods gave Luo Ye a lot of pressure and trouble. That was the problem of Ancestor Estrella. One of the clues was the guardian Antonio who survived the war, and the other was the artificial elf, Margaret. As Luo Ye had only returned for a short period of time, he hadn't contacted the two parties yet. However, Luo Ye was sure that they didn't have any good ideas. After so many years, there was still no news of this scholar. The only possibility was that things were out of his expectations. This was also the reason why Luo Ye used the Goddess of Fate's advice. Under the influence of these two forces, Luo Ye set this goal for himself. As he silently chanted his wish, the blessing in the system was successfully activated. Activation successful. Blessing effective. Ding, It's that easy to obtain? But what kind of advice was it? Goddess of Fate's advice. Time limit, 10 seconds? Looking at the first effect of the Goddess of Fate's advice, Luo Ya Akit was stunned. Is your but an auspicious sign? It's the blessing of the Goddess of Fate. You can't just spout nonsense. Thinking of this, Luo Ya took a step forward. He took a deep breath, lowered his waist, and extended his leg. In the next moment, he shot a powerful shot at Paul Ackman's buttocks. Paul, whose chrysanthemum was suddenly attacked, was dumbfounded. He only had time to let out a short scream before he was kicked away by a powerful force. The scream of being strangled was not noticed by the music and the noise of the crowd. However, the scene of Luo Ya kicking Paul fell into the eyes of the two girls. The black-haired boy didn't know that his actions had unknowingly eliminated the anger in the hearts of the two girls in the distance, thus resolving a small crisis. At this time, Luo Ya was observing Paul's parabola, trying to figure out how the Goddess of Fate's advice would affect the goal he set. Such doubts arose in the young man's mind. Under his gaze, Paul dashed toward the crowd ahead. At this time, at the end of the crowd, the old man with a white beard, Antonio, was chatting with the scholars of the school with a serious expression. They were discussing the problem of the Challenger Cup that was held once every few years in Leinster. Every Challenger Cup tournament could be said to be an unprecedented grand event. The impact on the students in the academy was immeasurable. If using the student sports in Luo Ya's previous life as an analogy, it was somewhat similar to a certain island country's baseball quotient. But in Shia, in the country of scholars, the Challenger Cup's impact was even greater. After all, in terms of scope, if a sport like baseball was based on all the citizens of a certain island country, then spells in Shia were based on the entire human world. And the winner of the fierce spell tournament only represented one thing, and that was strength. In the process, they would burn blood and tears, exhaust their wisdom and courage, and use everything they had to challenge the one and only throne. And the winner would also receive unimaginable fame and wealth. Originally, according to the rules of the previous years, the first years who had no actual combat experience were not allowed to participate. However, the internal and external environment this year was different. Whether to stick to the rules or to break through and innovate, this was a difficult choice, even for these high-level administrators. Seeing that the long discussion was fruitless, Antonio, who was stroking his beard, suggested. However, he did not expect that before his voice died away, a figure had already rushed toward him. At the critical moment, Paul Aikman's figure flashed and descended from the sky. Chapter 367. This year's first-year students were a little unusual. This was something that Dean Antonio had long known. To have so many students that required his attention in one batch was extremely rare even in Antonio's hundreds of years of teaching experience. And the absence of all these talents who had the potential to become the golden generation was undoubtedly a huge regret. Dean, so that's why, did he hear our conversation? Indeed, for Paul, as an illegitimate child, the Challenger's Cup was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to prove his worth. It was no wonder he was so excited. Paul Ackman, you want to give us some suggestions, right? It's okay, don't be nervous. As one of the main characters of this banquet, you have the right to voice your opinion. I'm not. Paul, if you don't participate this time, will you have any regrets? This is interviewing my feelings on crusading against the cult. So that's why, these people I don't know are probably outsiders. They might even be the higher-ups of the other Leinster academies. So, this is a competition between the academies? The dean wants to use us to boost his momentum? Got it. Bragging, I can do it. Regret. I'll regret it for life. But you have to know, as first years, there's a certain degree of danger for you to participate. Sigh, the youngsters these days are really something. Listening to the words of the elders, Paul was even more certain of his guess. On the other side, Antonio looked at Paul with eyes full of admiration. The old man smiled and continued to ask, Rivals from the upper years? Security department? Although we're not as strong as the upper years, we have experienced guidance. We can defeat the enemy through experience. Chapter 368. The Challenger's Cup wasn't important in the original game, Recorder's Eye. So, under the Goddess of Fate's advice, using pause but to change the reality that was different from the game, how could it help save Estrella and avoid the crisis? On the other hand, if the first years were allowed to participate, as one of the ring bearers, Luoya would definitely participate in the Challenger's Cup. Even if it was according to the ranking of the first years in the school, he would definitely participate in the Challenger's Cup because he was the third in the ranking of the first years. As for why he was third, it was mainly because he couldn't touch the first two. From the beginning of the preliminaries, Luoya's opponents all forfeited without exception. Those who didn't know would think that it was a rigged match. Against Nuair, not to mention the difference between the monarch and his minister, Luoya couldn't bring himself to do it. But it was worth mentioning that Nuair met Xia Luod in the finals. The match was quite fierce, and in the end, Xia Luod admitted defeat when he was at a disadvantage. Both sides stopped at a certain point. Minister, the magma milk ice cream is almost gone. Are you sure you don't want to try one? Looking at Gerlach, who was holding the ice cream that looked like a volcano model, Luoya couldn't help but be slightly stunned. The next moment, his expression changed and he rushed to the cold drink area. Thinking so, the teenager temporarily gave up thinking for the sake of food and began to taste the delicious food. The banquet gradually came to an end in a happy atmosphere. An hour later, in the teacher's dormitory area of St. Freya Academy, Luoya walked alone on the wide road. His final destination was a beautiful two-story building in this area, and the owner was the only teacher Luoya was close to and his pending relative, mentor Chris. It had been several days since he returned from the north, and Luoya's life had returned to the happy and peaceful track. He bid farewell to the death threat of the King of Curses, and bid farewell to the aurora and snow of Aberville. However, there was one person that Luoya didn't bid farewell to, and that was AI Lizzie. It was AI Lizzie's righteousness to examine Chris's character and conduct here. This was because once Luoya objected, it would be equivalent to not treating AI Lizzie as a family member and rejecting her as an adopted daughter. This was something that Luoya, who was very concerned about AI Lizzie's feelings, could not do. Moreover, as one of the core members of Akate Territory's intelligence work, AI Lizzie did indeed have the authority to verify the authenticity of the information. Ever since then, AI Lizzie had moved into Chris's house and refused to leave. Normally, he would take the time to visit her, but today, my bed is broken. Take her to your place. Chris. This short sentence made Luoya speechless. In fact, he had been thinking about a problem along the way. Luoya gently knocked on the door of the two-story building in front of him. Chris, who opened the door, smiled when he saw Luoya. He held his forehead and sighed. Sorry, the banquet just ended. You did a great job this time. Thanks to you, I even have more content to write to you. This. While Chris was stuttering from Luoya's question, a silver-white figure suddenly rushed out of the room and threw herself into the youth's arms, interrupting Luoya's questioning. Big brother, I missed you so much. Looking at the girl who was excitedly rubbing against his chest like a small animal, Roha's heart began to overflow with pampering. He didn't say anything about it. Looking at the two of them who were so in love with each other, Chris couldn't help but smile. Chris smelled the sweetness and smiled ambiguously. On the other side, AI Lizzie secretly made a gesture that everything was going well. But for a teacher, this problem didn't exist. Chris's teacher's dormitory was a standalone building. After his family and friends registered, they could move in. Therefore, the current situation was that AI Lizzie held the right to send letters to the Akate family, while Chris held the right to stay in St. Freya Academy. After thanking Chris for taking care of AI Lizzie, the black-haired youth waved goodbye to the young girl. The two of them walked along the road towards Tsong's Hall. But what the youth didn't know was that at the same time, in front of St. Freya Academy's gate, a luxurious carriage with a sword and shield emblem slowly came to a stop. The tall coachman raised a document and loudly announced the name of the person who came. Kingdom of Knights, Connaught family, open the door. Chapter 369. There's a carriage in the middle of the night? Late at night, St. Freya Academy was no longer as noisy as it was during the day. The whole neighborhood was quiet, and the loud carriage was too conspicuous. Of course, it attracted the boy's attention. But what Luo Ye didn't know was that while he was looking at the carriage, the person in the carriage was also looking at him. In that brief moment, the armored figure in the carriage noticed Luo Ye. She stood up abruptly, but before she could stop the carriage, the scene she saw made her dispel the idea. Was it a little inappropriate? That girl was his adopted sister. But she remembered that students were not allowed to bring their family members. Williams stopped at this point. The teaching staff went forward and respectfully knocked on the door. After a slightly dull knock, the old man's voice came from the room. When the old man's voice responded, the door lock automatically opened, and Williams walked in. Antonio's closed eyes slowly opened, and looked at the girl in front of him who was wrapped in an inexplicable majesty. "Honorable Sir Antonio, my father is doing well, thank you for your concern." As Antonio spoke, he couldn't help but sigh softly as he recalled the past. Hundreds of years had passed. He had once witnessed the calamity of life, and he was about to witness a new cycle of reincarnation. The smoke and dust of history had passed, but most of his old friends were no longer around. Williams fell into silence as he sensed the deeper meaning behind Antonio's words. The accompanying staff members quietly left the room after the two started their conversation. After the door closed, the young lady finally spoke again. "Duty? Hee, it seems that he is very strict with your education." "So, Williams, this time you suddenly came to St. Freya Academy, is there anything I can help you with? Transfer school? The Kingdom of Knights has its own academy, you are..." "I remember, there is a report on Luo Yaakat from my side, right?" Looking at Williams, the white-haired old man was unmoved, but he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Luo Yaakat, this was the bloodline awakener of the ancient family after hundreds of years. As the founder of the Twilight Sage Society, his appearance had attracted the attention of the remaining forces of the Sage Society and the hidden families since a few years ago. But because he had been living in seclusion, there were only speculations and rumors at that time. Originally, Antonio should have used his identity as a middleman to introduce Luo Ye into the circle of the Kingdom of Knights, and let him enter the eyes of the hidden families, let the shadow eagle of the ancient Austin Empire soar again, and let the King of the Darkness regain his glory. But as of now his understanding of Luo Ye, Antonio's thoughts gradually changed. And another more important reason was that Luo Yaakat showed Antonio a brand new possibility. With this young man as the center, the people gathered around him had unknowingly formed a mysterious force. This force was so huge that it had even reached the point where it could influence the world to a certain extent, and it was still growing rapidly. And what shocked Antonio the most was their response to the crisis. In this process, the hatred of the country was put aside, and the conflicts between religions were also put aside. For the same goal, they worked together at that moment. This scene was simply a miracle for Antonio, who was used to seeing the internal division of humans. Since the Great Migration, the various forces of the human world had never gathered around one person like this. If this force were to fully mature, looking at Williams who was waiting for his answer, Antonio pondered for a moment and slowly opened his mouth. "Yes, but I have a condition." Chapter 370. I say, Lizzie, can you explain why you're in my bed? Old Sama is awake? Good morning. Don't you think you've been using this trick too much recently? Lizzie, don't think you can get away with it. After the two returned to Tsang Hall yesterday, Luo Ye decided to give his bed to Lizzie in order to let her sleep comfortably, while he himself stayed in an empty room on the second floor for the night. Without a doubt, as a dormitory that hasn't been used yet, the condition of the empty room is definitely not very good. This move is completely Luo Ye's behavior of spoiling his sister. Old Sama, I'm not familiar with the bed. Although that room is good, I can't sleep. The bed is indeed not good, but Old Sama, I'm familiar with it. Looking at Lizzie, who said so with a smile, Luo Ye pointed at the girl for a long time without saying anything. He could only give up and sigh helplessly in his heart. The black-haired boy sat on the bed and looked into the distance. He felt that this was completely different from the plan he made a few years ago to let AI Lizzie become more and more independent as she grew older. As for AI Lizzie herself, he didn't have the slightest intention of alienating her as she grew older. The deviation from the past expectations and reality made the boy a little skeptical of life, but this didn't stop the girl from hugging his arm and rubbing against it. After helplessly stopping AI Lizzie's further offensive, the two washed up and went to the small dining room to have breakfast. It's just that it's worth mentioning that because of Lillian, AI Lizzie was extremely hostile to Paul, who was also an archmon, making Paul restless and helpless. He ate with trepidation. Later, Luoya specifically chatted with AI Lizzie and told her about Paul's situation. Only then did she ease up. Of course, not looking for trouble is not looking for trouble, but when eating, she still has to sit far away. Don't even think about looking good, but this is probably the limit of what the girl can do. Minister, Miss AI Lizzie, good morning. Looking at the young man with dark circles under his eyes like a national treasure in his previous life, Luoya raised his eyebrows and looked puzzled. And opposite Garak, Paul also had the demeanor of an immortal and stood out from the crowd. He smiled and said good morning to Luoya. Noticing the state of the two, Rohan naturally asked for the reason. Behind him, Elisa also stuck out her small head with a puzzled expression. So, under the two's questioning, they heard the reason for the two's ascension, which was to revise for the exam. The mathematics curriculum in St. Freya's Academy was extremely difficult. It had already surpassed the average level of Leinster University. Facts had proven that no matter which world one was in, mathematics was a nightmare for some people. For Paul, who had not received much education since he was young, it was simply a disaster. Then the intensive tutoring began. As a result, after a night of tutoring, Paul was fine, but Jellic was going crazy. The reason was very simple. Isn't that great? So, what about now? Chapter 371. Why do you suddenly want everyone to participate in this? This is not my wish. It's the request of the Dean Antonio. That's right. Last night, Williams, who was the fastest to travel, went to meet with the Dean of St. Freya's Academy and former member of the Twilight Sage Association, Antonio. This action was originally intended to gain his support. However, what the young lady did not expect was that Antonio did not seem to want them to affect Luoya Akit too much. He even requested for them to transfer schools. As a result, the number of students transferred from St. Fran's Academy in the country of Knights increased greatly. Teresa was naturally one of them. However, the young lady was not happy about this situation. Instead, she was deeply worried. Therefore, the so-called hidden families were not some heroes living in seclusion in a village. They did not live a miserable life. On the contrary, most of them were famous nobles in Pender, the country of knights. As for why they wanted to hide their bloodline, the reason was very simple. Many of the hidden families' bloodline came from other races. While they had great strength, there were also drawbacks. However, what if the bloodline was unstable, had drawbacks, and even violated some of the public morals and common sense of mankind? Under such a comparison of benefits and risks, many families with other races' bloodline began to keep their own situation a secret. Thus, the hidden families were formed. After the Third Era, when Ald was divided into 7 glorious families, without a leader, they began to gradually close themselves off. They became active only in their own circle, and this circle was the country of knights. Knowing little about the outside world would easily lead to arrogance. One of the results of this situation among the younger generation was that many members of the Dawn Club in St. Fran's Academy were not ordinary problem children, but super problem children. In the meeting room with the curtains drawn, both sides of the long table were already full. Including Williams, there were a total of 7 people. However, unlike the usual quiet and serious meetings of the mysterious organization, this meeting was unusually noisy. How troublesome. On one side of the table, among the 7 people, a short brown-haired young lady said as she narrowed her eyes. The murderous intent in her eyes could not be concealed. Hearing her words, the black-haired, red-eyed young lady on the other side of the table was stunned for a moment before she happily agreed. Right? That's the former leader's family. If they want to lead us or something, isn't it natural that they are stronger than us? Then the simplest way is to fight, right? Looking at the brown-haired girl, Williams said in a heavy tone. But after hearing her words, the brown-haired girl named Selena didn't remain silent. Instead, she widened her eyes that were shining brightly in the darkness. The combat prowess of that clan's awakened is known to all throughout history. Moreover, just the fact that they're awakened from the Akhat clan is enough to make them qualified to lead us. Their previous clan, the Arde clan, had many achievements. Juliana squinted and licked her lips, interrupting Williams and caressing her cheeks. Upon hearing her words, the Pender nobles began to get restless. You're right. If that's the case, we might as well make our move during the school transfer ceremony. Chapter 372. At the breakfast table, the news published in the newspaper shocked everyone except Ai Lizzie. After all, as a student of St. Freya Academy, Luoya and the others still knew some of the most basic things. The country of knights was the representative of the physical side of supernatural powers. It was the place where martial arts schools gathered. It had its own St. Fran Academy and had very little interaction with St. Freya Academy. There were not many students who entered the academy from there. As for transfer students, it was unheard of. However, under such circumstances, there was more than one transfer student in the country of knights. Luoya naturally thought of Williams and the others. But from the sudden appearance of the goddess of fate's words, this matter seemed to be related to Gurok. It was the plot of a noble from the country of knights named Brittany who transferred to St. Freya Academy to capture her fiancé, Gurok. After this plot, Brittany would join the main character team. But originally, this plot should have happened much later. After all, Gurok lived a very low-key life here. Under the circumstances where he concealed his identity, no one would be able to find him for a while. But now, it's nothing more. Looking at the doubtful military advisor Gurok, Luoya, who could roughly guess what would happen in the future, showed a caring expression on his face. He personally handed a piece of bread to Gurok. The youth who received the bread was confused. Somehow, he felt that the atmosphere of this breakfast had become strange. 1 second remember, "Good morning, Senior Lillian." Hearing Luoya's greeting, Lillian, who was still sitting in the front row, gave a faint reply. Her expression did not change as if it was just a polite greeting. However, what outsiders did not notice was that after the greeting, the corner of the black-haired girl's mouth couldn't help but curl up. Her mood seemed to be better all of a sudden. "By the way, have you guys seen today's school newspaper? My friend in the school newspaper said that this news was given by the dean. I heard that there will be something more important to announce in the afternoon assembly. The arrival of a transfer student, even if he came from the country of knights, shouldn't be important enough for the dean to send a message to the newspaper." Antonio's action gave Roja a feeling that he was reminding him so that he could be prepared. The black-haired youth made up his mind. As Chris entered the classroom and started the class, the chatter between the students quickly ended. After a month, Luoya once again experienced the hardships of the Hell class. But this time, Luoya wasn't worried about the progress because Chris would give him more classes. Of course, as Christian's extra class was a formal procedure, it caused Lillian's teaching time to be greatly reduced. Lillian was naturally unhappy about it, but due to their identities, the black-haired girl couldn't voice out her grievances. "It's really about the banquet, right? You are all favored by the goddess of fate." It was basically impossible for those who transferred from St. Fran Academy to St. Freya Academy to be nobles. After all, who would purposely transfer if they were comfortable in school? A soft sigh dissipated in the noise of the students. After lunch and a short rest, the first-year students began to gather in the auditorium. Luoya and the others entered this solemn building again after a night, but this time, they were the audience. Last time, Paul made Antonio and the others change their minds. What kind of reaction would his words cause this time? Chapter 373. When the 7-person team headed by Williams stepped onto the stage, the excited students who had yet to calm down gave a warm round of applause. All the students present, regardless of their gender, couldn't help but have curiosity in their eyes. Under such circumstances, the first-year students who were already excited couldn't help but feel excited. On the other hand, the transfer students who stepped onto the stage were indeed different. The girl with pink hair and pink eyes was gentle and cute. She had a smile on her face but didn't speak, Teresa. The tall and muscular man who didn't wear any armor, Gelt. The girl with black hair and rare red eyes, Juliana, who was wearing a lace aristocratic costume. When the 7 boys and girls with their own unique features appeared in front of the crowd, the students below the stage immediately began to whisper to each other's ears. Don't you think the blindfolded person is a little handsome? The girls clapped their hands and looked forward curiously. The boys were even more excited. They looked at the girls with unique clothes and couldn't help but comment. No, obviously the one with black hair is better. She has a very elegant temperament. The overly realistic thoughts blurted out, satisfying the curiosity of the students. However, in the audience, beside Luoya, the gray-haired boy's reaction was completely different from the other students. Looking at the golden-haired girl on the stage, Jellic's face turned pale and he trembled like a sieve. He never thought that the transfer from the country of knights was not a student who couldn't stay there anymore, but a big noble of Pender. Among the 7 people present, except for Williams of the royal family, everyone was the heir of a great aristocratic family, especially Teresa and Brittany. Both of them were the daughters of the Duke's family. But this wasn't the main point. The main point was that Gerlach absolutely couldn't meet one of them. The gray-haired boy looked at the girl who was engaged to him on the stage. He covered his mouth with both hands and began to chant crazily in his heart. He tried his best to stop his body from trembling instinctively. At the same time, his mind sorted out a set of reasons why he didn't need to escape now. Looking around the crowd, Gerlach, who felt the sense of community security, breathed a sigh of relief. However, the young man didn't know that the nearby crowd might have provided him with a protective color, but these were far less dazzling than the bright lights around him. On the stage, Williams, who was dressed in heavy armor, looked at the crowd. Almost instantly, she made eye contact with the young man in the audience seats. Following the guidance of her aura, the other 6 people also found the target of their trip. Teresa waved her hand downwards and revealed a sweet smile in Luoya's direction. However, when she saw the gray-haired youth beside Luoya, she was slightly taken aback. For some inexplicable reason, she felt that he was somewhat familiar. The moment she remembered Garrick's identity, the girl's pink eyes suddenly widened, but it was too late. Beside Teresa, the heroic blonde girl's body was already surrounded by a thick curse power, and she rushed out like a rocket with a roar. On the other hand, Jellic himself was dumbfounded when he saw the situation. Shortly after, he was scared out of his wits. He instinctively wanted to escape, but it was too late. Boom! It was a pair of golden, mysterious, and majestic eyes. The pupils were like candlelight that flickered with a radiance that could see through one's heart. They were indifferent as though they didn't contain any emotions, but they weren't as sinister as reptiles. Under the gaze of these eyes, the young lady's anger and resentment dissipated rapidly as though sealed in ice. The heavy pressure brought Brittany back to her senses. Realizing that she had lost her composure due to the influence of her bloodline, Brittany fell to the side while Jellic looked at his minister with gratitude. It was only at this moment that the students finally reacted. Amidst the screams, they scattered in all directions and distanced themselves from Luo Ya's group. What's going on? Revenge? It's Brittany who couldn't hold it in first. You can't blame me now, right? Hey! Wait up. However, before the excited Selena and the joyful Juliana could challenge the young man who stood motionless, a holy, dazzling radiance and spatial ripples descended at the same time. As transfer students, you actually dared to attack the ring-bearers. How unbelievable! Can I interpret this as you challenging the authority of the ring-bearers? However, seeing them appear, Selena and the others didn't shrink back. At the same time, Williams and Teresa arrived one after the other. The armored man wanted to explain, but when he saw the 2 girls beside Roja, he fell into an inexplicable silence. The 2 sides looked at each other in silence. Only the aura of the curse grew stronger and stronger. On the seemingly forgotten ceremonial stage, the white-haired elder gazed at the two parties with a glint in his eyes. Chapter 374. Inside the auditorium, with the black-haired young man and the armored Williams as the center, the two major factions glared at each other with swords drawn. Outside the auditorium, Antonio remained silent as if he had turned invisible. The students who were watching the commotion were getting noisier and noisier. If it weren't for the goddess of fate's suggestion, Luoya would have had to accompany AI Lizzie for lunch today. As a result, he would have entered the auditorium alone. Correspondingly, Gerlach, who wasn't the target of the country of knights, wouldn't have been exposed. The auditorium would have ended peacefully with applause. Gerlach didn't need to run anymore, and Luoya didn't need to chase after him because he had been exposed. Due to Brittany's actions, some people in the country of knights seemed to have changed their attitude toward Luoya. Brittany's loss of control was similar to a broken window effect. As she wasn't stopped in time, she became an example. The young girls named Selena and Juliana began to break free from William's restraints and reveal their true natures. Nua Iyer and Xiaoluo were also alarmed by Luoya's involvement. The members of both sides swarmed into the auditorium, which led to the current confrontation. If Brittany had attacked Luoya, the young man could have laughed it off after defending himself. However, the one who was attacked was Gerlach. Naturally, Luoya couldn't forgive Brittany on behalf of others, nor could he hand Brittany over to take the blame. Your Highness Williams, Miss Teresa, long time no see. Please allow me to express my gratitude for your help in the north. Long time no see, Luoya. What, an acquaintance? Your Highness Williams, some of your members were too excited about transferring to another school, which led to some misunderstandings between our friends. I don't think this was the country of knights' intention. What do you think? Williams apologized politely, which made Luoya sigh in relief. However, before the young man could rejoice, the armored figure suddenly looked at Nuayer and Xiaoluo with hostility in his tone. Well, as everyone knows, the country of knights believes in strength. Although we are now in a foreign country, we have no intention of listening to the instructions of the weak. Only the strong can gain our respect. We haven't fought yet, so I don't know about these things. With William's sudden provocation and his public declaration that he would not listen to the ringbearer's declaration, the audience was in an uproar. Nuayer took a step forward and asked with an angry smile. Xiaoluo reached into his arms and grabbed the bottle containing the golden soul. So, we can go now, right? I've been waiting for a long time. As a warrior who pursued battle and slaughter all year round, Selena was always interested in the strongest of her enemies, just like Miss Angel who was overflowing with curses. However, before she could launch her attack, a sudden heavy pressure mixed with a bone-chilling coldness suddenly appeared from the side. When the young lady turned her head and focused on Luoya, the black-haired young man looked at her for the first time. When his golden eyes landed on the brown-haired young lady, several shadows suddenly appeared in the young lady's eyes. What followed was an intense fear that aroused Selena's instincts. Chapter 375. When night fell, Luoya, Paul, and Jarek sat around the table in the Broken Sword Tavern in the commercial street of the college, sipping wine and reading the newspaper on the table. The newspaper staff who didn't know the details attributed it to the cultural difference caused by the custom of respecting only the strong in the country of knights. They highly praised Luoya's performance in suppressing the other party and defending the authority of the ringbearers. However, the focus of the report was still on the matter of Antonio encouraging the first-year students to boldly participate in the Challenger Cup competition. After discovering that there were suddenly so many people from the country of knights, Luoya immediately understood that the plot in the original work had greatly changed in reality. At least, it was certain that it was no longer the main event. Judging from the current situation, this hostility was especially obvious on Nua Iyer and the others. In the past, when Luoya and Xiaoluo first met, Miss Luoya was also angry because Luoya was with other women. However, that was because the two were engaged. Luoya could understand this point. Jarek, the #1 doghead military advisor of Rose Tsangwei's faction, was the young master of the Pander Stevenson Marquis family in the country of Knights. As one of the high nobles, he naturally knew a lot about the situation in the country of Knights. However, due to excessive shock, when he left the auditorium, his legs were like noodles. If it weren't for Paul, he probably wouldn't have been able to walk out. One of the reasons for this was that, as the saying goes, alcohol strengthens one's courage. No matter how terrifying the situation was, 2 glasses of alcohol would basically make one feel heroic. Another reason was that the lively atmosphere and crowd in the tavern during the dinner peak would give one a sense of security. Remember in a second. What? That woman is your fiancée? In the Broken Sword Tavern, Paul, who didn't know the cause and effect of the matter, couldn't help but exclaim after hearing Jellick's story. The content of his words immediately attracted the attention of several guests nearby. Seeing this, Luo Ya hurriedly reminded them. The 3 picked up their glasses and drank. After a long silence, Jellick continued to talk about the situation of the people from the country of Knights. In terms of appearance, even though Brittany wasn't as beautiful as Nu'a Iyer and the others, she was still considered a standard beauty. Besides, due to her years of training, she had a great figure and powerful strength. She also had the bloodline of the ancient Valkyrie. But just like Shia's old rule, there were pros and cons. The bloodline of the Valkyrie didn't only have advantages, but it also had huge flaws. Brani's family had been dominated by females for generations. Their bloodline abilities were far stronger than that of males, but the family head was always a male. The biggest reason for this was that females with the Valkyrie bloodline were emotionally unstable. Brani's condition was considered mild in the family, but even so, Gerlach still couldn't take it. As a girl's gift, it does seem a little bloody. But the country of Knights has such a custom, so it shouldn't be a big deal, right? No, that's not the main point. The main point is, when she returned, she was covered in blood and told me that if I had a change of heart, I would end up like these magical creatures. After hearing the gray-haired young man's words, Paul's hand froze in midair. His eyes revealed fear. Luo Ya took a sip of wine and sighed helplessly. That's right. Back then, the young Brani asked her mother for advice on how to make Jellick like her. If she were in an ordinary family, this wouldn't be a problem. After all, the older, the wiser. But the problem was that this happened in the Lund family. Brani's mother was also a Valkyrie and was much sicker than Brani. With their current relationship, it was obvious that they couldn't resolve this misunderstanding on their own. If no one interfered, perhaps Brani's engagement would be broken off and she would turn completely evil. When that happened, Jellick's life would be in danger. Luo Ya, who wanted information about the others, started asking questions. Jellick listened and told them one by one. However, compared to the Lund family, who knew everything about Brani, Jellick's information was lacking. There's actually such a thing? How mysterious. But it was better not to know about the secrets of the royal family. Chapter 376. Are Williams and Teresa a couple? Putting aside the fact that there were so many outsiders this time, the last time Luo Ya met them in Aberville in the north, it was a real accident. At that time, Williams and Teresa still didn't take off their armor, and the two didn't have any intimate actions. Even when they left, it was Williams who put his hand on Teresa's shoulder. Such a thought flashed through the young man's mind, but he didn't say it out loud. He picked up the wooden cup and took a sip of the sweet and malty beer. After ordering a portion of nuts and a portion of jerky to go with the beer, the 3 of them continued their discussion. Luo Ya thought for a while and remembered the girl with black hair and red eyes in the country of Knights. Gerlach showed a distressed expression when he heard the words. He thought for a while and said, "As for Juliana herself, she usually doesn't appear at banquets. She only appears at night. I heard that it's because she's afraid of sunburn. I don't know her extraordinary strength, but generally speaking, she's easy to get along with." Listening to Gerlach's introduction, Luo Ya's face showed an expected expression. He, who was familiar with history, actually had some ideas when they met. After hearing Gerlach's introduction, he was even more certain. Legend has it that the blood race was born from the blood of Shia. There were also rumors that the blood race was born from the blood of Shia. But no matter which version, it was inseparable from Shiya. In this world, having a relationship with Shiya basically represented a noble birth. In fact, some human scholars believed that humans were blood race who had lost their abilities after degeneration. Thinking of this, Luoya shook his head and began to recall the brown-haired girl who left the deepest impression on him. He remembered that her name was Selena. That girl was undoubtedly very conspicuous, but it wasn't because of anything good, it was because of the beast-like killing intent. Selena is the daughter of Count But. In fact, our relationship is not bad. We have met when we were young, but Selena wasn't like this at that time. Luoya raised his eyebrows and asked. Gurok thought for a while and said, the Batet family has always been famous for their berserkers. The outside world speculates that the price of their bloodline may be the desire to kill. It's fine during wartime, but it will become troublesome during peacetime. Selena seems to be very talented in that family, so the result is that her ability is even more difficult to control. After listening to Gurok's words, the black-haired young man fell into silence for a while. He didn't expect that the troublesome girl would have such a story. Paul on the side also showed a surprised expression. But when the two were about to let Gurok continue to dig deeper into the country of knights, the young man helplessly said that there was not much information left. Chapter 377. Antonio's current mood was very complicated. Antonio was too careless. He didn't dodge and was hit on the spot, leaving him dumbfounded. After his mood eased a little, Antonio couldn't help but feel enlightened. He could only advise him to take care of himself and reflect on it. Don't play these tricks. When it comes to exposing the dark history, harmony is the most important thing. After the initial shock, Antonio immediately thought about how Luoya knew about these things that even he had almost forgotten, as well as his teacher, Estrid. After a detailed consideration, the old man came to only one conclusion, and that was the legendary bloodline ability of that clan. 400 years ago, a member of the Dusk Sage Association, codenamed Guardian, told me. After listening to Luoya's answer, Antonio's face revealed a wry smile, but at the same time, his mood was lifted because after Luoya experienced that period of time 400 years ago, the biggest communication barrier between Antonio and him disappeared. Assisting in awakening a powerhouse of unknown origin, no matter who it was, this kind of thing would be very cautious. After all, if the awakened powerhouse was an extremely vicious person, then it was likely that it would cause a great loss of life. But if one had a certain understanding of the other party and could confirm that both parties were related by blood, this kind of thing was much simpler. I'm here to ask you, Guardian Antonio, my ancestor, Estrid Ald, what's the situation now? Is the problem she's facing related to the remaining forces of the Kingdom of Knights Sage Society? After listening to Luoya's question, the white-haired old man sighed and said so. He couldn't help but reveal a little sadness on his face. After thinking for a moment, Antonio slowly told the truth of the matter. What? In Leinster 400 years ago, without Luoya presiding over it, the morale of the Saint Heroes Society was very low. In fact, it didn't last long at all. After the Saint Heroes Society's forces were eliminated, the Brotherhood of Redemption launched a siege on the inner city. At that time, the battle was very tragic, and the defenders suffered heavy casualties. The battle that followed was a nightmare that haunted the old man for hundreds of years. The shattered city, the fallen comrades, and countless ordinary people were scattered in the aftermath of the impact of Pulist's curse power. At the end of the battle, it was the scene of Estrid fusing with Chaos Dream. But it's a pity that even the attack of such a shameless person was unbearable for the fragile Chaos Dream. At that time, Madame Estrid, who was severely injured, took the initiative to fuse with the Chaos Dream in order to protect this treasure that concerns the future of mankind. She used her Dream Demon attribute to restore it automatically at daybreak, but because of that, she fell into an eternal slumber. After this battle, Leinster was almost reduced to a dead city. St. Freya Academy automatically restored itself after daybreak due to Estrid's dream enchantment, but there were less than 100 survivors in the academy. And of course, the tragedy of Leinster had a profound impact on the history of mankind. For that reason, the Human Alliance had even stopped their counterattack against the other worldlings, setting up a special investigation team to hunt down the cultists in their ranks and carrying out a great purge. Due to the terrible impact of the Leinster tragedy, the name of the Lord of Curses, priest, had been erased from history. Hundreds of years had passed, and there were very few who knew the truth of that incident. After hearing the whole story of the tragedy of Leinster, Luoya asked Estrid about the reason why she couldn't wake up. The answer he got was that Estrid's behavior wasn't within the plan, which left the artificial elf, Margaret, at a loss on how to deal with it. At that time, the other reason was the opposition from the Twilight Sage Association. However, in the face of so many difficulties, Antonio didn't give up. In order to save his mentor, he devoted himself to studying Chaos Dream for hundreds of years. As his research deepened, he finally came up with a feasible solution. The blood of ordinary Akit tribesmen is useless. They are very different from the Arde family from 1,000 years ago. Only the awakened bloodline that is closer to the origin will work. That's right, that's you. Another dream demon bloodline in the country of knights. Upon hearing Antonio's words, Luoya narrowed his eyes and his pupils contracted abruptly. Chapter 378. Luoya looked at Antonio with a serious expression, and the latter nodded affirmatively. The dream demon bloodline is in that country, but I can't get any help from them. What I want you to do is to get their support and push forward the plan. There's nothing wrong with what you've said. But since that's the case, why did you allow our conflict to continue, Dean? Isn't this the opposite of your goal? You mean, there's something you're hiding? Naturally, Roha heard the word school before, but as a traditional jutsu master, his knowledge of martial arts is limited, it's almost a blank. That's the school of the royal family of knights, the Cobnet family. It's one of the 3 core powers of the Cobnet family, together with the source substance, courage, and the dragon bloodline. Strictly speaking, it's a special curse. The source substance was an unavoidable part of Shiya's supernatural power, and it was also the core of the supernatural system. But just like traditional conjurers who created all kinds of curses to strengthen their power, the knights who leaned towards the physical body also found many ways to strengthen their power. One of them was the school of thought, and its essence was actually a kind of pseudo-source substance. Lofty ideals, firm principles, unshakable determination, and the stronger the will, the more invincible and powerful the heart sword would be. It could even reach the level of a holy sword when developed to the limit. I understand the situation of the heart sword school, but what does it have to do with the conflict between us? The reason why I let the conflict happen is simple. It's because the conflict will inevitably happen, and the sooner it happens, the less impact it will have on both sides. Because the path you're taking is too different from the traditional classicism of the Auld family and the Twilight Sage Association. Hearing this unexpected word, Luoya couldn't help but frown slightly, and Antonio immediately gave an answer. Traditional classicism advocates sacrificing one's own fame and fortune to protect the human world while hiding in the darkness. The current country of knights pursues this. Their closed environment and the fact that Williams is wearing a suit of armor might have something to do with this. But what about you? In order to build a strong will, the Heart Sword School will often be too strict on their successors. Williams was able to endure the armor and tough training for a long time because of his classical chivalry. This is probably one of the components of his Heart Sword School. However, your path is completely different from his. This conflict of ideas is inevitable. After understanding William's situation, Luoya nodded slightly. He finally understood Antonio's actions. It had to be said that after knowing the full picture, Luoya also felt that the conflict between the two parties was inevitable. After all, it was impossible for him to give up his current life. On the other hand, Luoya also praised and disapproved of the classical chivalry attitude in his heart. The reason was the change in environment. Back then, the Auld family was the shadow of the royalty and the uncrowned king of the human world. They didn't need to stand in front of the stage and shout. The ancient Austin Empire was the only administrative body that was highly related to the fate of the entire human world. They could allocate enough resources for the Auld family, centralize their advantages, and resolve the crisis without affecting the normal activities of most humans. But now, the people's hearts were scattered, and it was hard to lead them. In the current environment, even if one were to stand on the side of the road and shout, "Save the world," with a loudspeaker, no one would be willing to spend a cent or contribute a little, let alone in the dark. In the end, if one didn't centralize power and resources, there would often be big problems in the face of a great crisis. This was a law that had been proven in Luo Ya's previous life. From a human's perspective, Luo Ya felt that this kind of mechanism without positive feedback wasn't right. Noble idealists were indeed admirable, but should idealists starve? If this is the difference in ideas, then we might not be able to get along well. Dean, do you have any good ideas? Past experience? I'm afraid you are more special to her. The old man thought as he gazed at Luo Ya with a meaningful smile. Chapter 379. On the street at night, Luo Ya strolled around the campus with a cane in his hand. He recalled the inexplicable look from Dean Antonio before he left and felt something was wrong. It was unrealistic to tell others his thoughts without reservation unless the two parties had enough trust, which Luo Ya and Antonio obviously didn't have. Listening to the noise of the students walking around at night, Luo Ya strolled away from Antonio's office building after a detailed discussion and walked in the direction of the mantra station. However, before he walked far, he suddenly heard the sound of the system bell. The advice of the goddess of fate, huh? Drink juice? Although the conversation with Antonio was easy, the two sides were not close to the point of drinking tea and chatting. After wasting a lot of time talking, Luo Ya didn't drink a drop of water, which made his throat a little uncomfortable, and the dried nuts he ate before coming here made him feel a little angry. Full of doubts, Luo Ya thought for a moment and changed his route. He followed the nearby crowd into the commercial street and found that it was the most lively time of the commercial street. It's actually so lively? Looking at the absolute majority of the gathered crowd, Luo Ya couldn't help but sigh at the merchant's grasp of the appearance of the food. Just when he was wondering why the advice asked him to come here, a familiar figure appeared in the crowd in front of Luo Ya's eyes. At night, with so many people buying, it was difficult for the girl who couldn't speak and could only write to communicate. She may also attract the attention of others, especially after the conflict with Luo Ya and others in the afternoon. As a transfer student, she was too conspicuous. "It's so beautiful, do you want to try that?" "I see, then I'll buy it for you." Hearing the sudden question, the girl who nodded subconsciously was slightly taken aback. It was not until this moment that she finally recovered her senses. Teresa turned her head and looked at the side in surprise. When she saw the black-haired boy beside her, she couldn't help but widen her eyes. "Good evening, Mr. Luo Ya." After listening to Luo Ya's words, the blushing girl wrote these two sentences in a panic, then held the book in front of her chest. However, after seeing the girl's reply, Luo Ya was silent. He looked at the sign next to the popular stall, thought for a moment and said, Seeing Teresa like this, Luo Ya couldn't help but smile. After a short wait, the black-haired boy finally succeeded in bringing back two colorful drinks for the girl. The two people tasted side by side at the long public table on the side of the road. Miss Teresa's throat is easily dry? Chapter 380. He's been waiting for you. Williams is waiting for me? What does that mean? If she wanted to explain this sentence, it would be difficult to avoid touching on some of William's secrets. Although Roja should be very reliable from his standpoint, this kind of thing wasn't something Teresa could decide to say. Thinking of this, the girl sighed and slowly shook her head toward Roja. The black-haired boy saw this and tacitly didn't ask again. He nodded and picked up the cup and drank the juice. Such a thought flashed through Luo Ya's mind and made his heart feel heavy. But after looking at the young lady beside him, he sighed in relief. Teresa was one of the core members of the group from the country of knights. She was also the most normal person Luo Ya felt. It was important for Luo Ya to establish a good relationship with her. Thinking of this, The young man understood the importance of this suggestion. But then, a question appeared in his mind. 1 second to remember. Teresa, are you visiting the academy? If so, I can introduce you. No, actually, I'm looking for someone. Yes, it's Brittany. I couldn't find her after dinner. Seeing the name on the young lady's notebook, the black-haired young man suddenly thought of something and was dumbfounded. In the forest outside the Blue Hall, a golden-haired girl wearing light armor was peeking at the elegant mansion through the gaps of the leaves. She looked at the lights on the first floor of the building that went out one by one, and the sound of her breathing couldn't help but become heavier. But such a genius, after entering St. Freya Academy, unexpectedly met her fiancé who ran away from home to escape the marriage contract. She didn't dare to take him away because she met someone she couldn't fight against. That was the target of this transfer operation, Luo Yaaka. If she fought, she definitely couldn't defeat him. If she wanted, she probably couldn't take him away either. But there might be other ways. Although there was a man named Paul by Gaylock's side, he was only a grade 5 source grade and wasn't much of a hindrance. According to the information they gathered during this half a day, most of the students in Sangji Hall were first years and there weren't many who were strong. Then, if I rush in now, wouldn't? I advise you not to do that. All of a sudden, Brittany's body stiffened as she was about to launch a surprise attack. She turned around and saw a pair of golden eyes looking at her calmly from the depths of the forest under the shadow of the lush foliage. The emotionless gaze seemed to be silently persuading her to calm down. Brittany's pupils contracted when she discovered the young man behind her. The fear in her heart made her want to release her curse, but she was afraid of provoking the unfathomable man. While she was in a dilemma, Luo Ya spoke again. Teresa? In any case, the friendly relationship between Luo Ya and Teresa eased Brittany's nerves slightly. Luo Ya also heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing this. Mr. Luo Ya, I am his fiancé. If you stop me, I will, help? What do you mean? I've heard about the incident with the Run family and what you've done. I'll just tell you the result. If this continues, the engagement will be annulled. As soon as Luo Ya said this, Brittany, who already had a premonition, felt as though she was struck by lightning. She held onto the tree trunk beside her as her eyes glowed like a dead fish. However, just as she was in despair, Luo Ya suddenly changed the topic. Help each other? What do you mean? I'll say this first. I won't be a traitor. Miss Brittany, you're overthinking it. I only hope that you can help me establish a friendly relationship with Williams. This will only be beneficial for both of us. Or do you prefer to treat me as an enemy? Brittany hesitated upon hearing Luo Ya's question. Establishing a good relationship with Luo Ya was the goal of the Country of Knights, so there didn't seem to be any problems. However, she had to admit that forming such an alliance in private made her feel like she was betraying her teammate. Miss Brittany, I can actually provide you with something else. A set of cutlery and blanket from Gerlach. Luo Ya revealed a satisfied smile as he looked at the young lady who widened her eyes in excitement. Spy +1. Chapter 381. This attribute can be mild or severe, but the Valkyrie's blood has one advantage, which is that it's normal for an outsider, and this is the premise for Roja and Brawny to communicate. The third blessing was probably to get closer to Teresa and stop Brittany from running amok. But this was just a facade. The real purpose was to rope in the Knight's country and create the conditions to awaken Estrella. Luo Ya sighed and returned to his room. As soon as he entered the room, a silver-haired figure hugged him. Ai Lizzie? Why are you here again? Isn't the bed fixed? Big brother, Teacher Chris's kitchen utensils are broken, so he asked me to come here for dinner. Kitchen utensils after the bedding? Forget about the bed, how could the pot be broken? Luo Ya was full of questions but couldn't find a way to retort. He pinched his brows and looked at the adorable young lady. It was supposed to be like this, but my ability detected suspicious activity nearby. For safety reasons, I waited here for Big Brother. But judging from the situation just now, she seems to be your guest? Is it because of the moonlight? I feel like Ai Lizzie's ability is amazing. Heh, you sent her away with just a set of tableware and a blanket? What a pitiful woman. I've already, cough cough. I mean, her interests aren't good. With the help of his strategic ally, Teacher Chris, tonight was the second night that AI Lizzie successfully stayed behind. But if things went according to plan, Luo Ye would have to sleep in the empty room on the second floor. This wasn't something AI Lizzie could tolerate. How could she make use of this rare opportunity to block Big Brother's escape route? By the way, Big Brother, how about we play chess tonight? How about watching the moon after chess? How about taking a bath after watching the moon? Luo Ye, who was helpless in the face of AI Lizzie's continuous coquettishness, turned to look at the silver-haired girl with a stern look. What's wrong with that? Didn't I bathe with Big Brother before? Could it be that Big Brother doesn't like AI Lizzie anymore? When they grow up, they will find their younger sister annoying or something. When did I say that you're annoying? AI Lizzie, don't overthink things. That's because you've grown up? The black-haired youth ridiculed in his heart. He looked at the beautiful girl under the moonlight, whose beauty was even more soul-stirring. His eyes swept across her body that had already begun to develop. He only felt a restless flame rampaging through his body, burning his heart and making him panic. As she grew older, AI Lizzie's charm grew stronger and stronger, and the power of the perfect, origin substance began to manifest itself. Luo Ye was already at the limit of what she could do normally, and the consequences of bathing together were unimaginable. Then, I want to sleep with you tonight. Hearing AI Lizzie's request, Luo Ye couldn't help but hesitate. Seeing him like this, AI Lizzie's red eyes began to fill with tears again. She bit her lips as if she was about to cry, forcing the black-haired youth to nod. I understand, Big Brother. Am I spoiling her too much? But how should a normal brother and sister get along? A few years ago in the Akot family, the young Luo Ye often played board games with AI Lizzie in their pajamas. Because the two of them had a lot of private lessons during the day, they could only be together at night, and it wasn't taboo to fall asleep when they were tired from playing. However, as the saying goes, after Luo Ye became the acting feudal lord, he became busier and busier, and it had been a long time since he played with AI Lizzie like this. The moonlight tonight was very good, and AI Lizzie, who was bathed in the moonlight, was full of energy. The two of them played until it was close to midnight, and the result was naturally AI Lizzie defeating Luo Ye, who automatically went easy on himself. The two of them played until they were tired, and after looking at the moon for a while by the window, the silver-haired girl yawned. Luo Ye saw this and smiled, officially asking to rest. Big Brother, this is? In the darkness after the lights were turned off, Luo Ye and AI Lizzie silently prepared to sleep, but not long after, the girl's weak voice suddenly came from the other side of the 38th parallel. Then how did you sleep at Teacher Chris's place? Now, you can fall asleep, right? Feeling the warmth by her hand, the silver-haired girl was silent for a moment before answering softly, and she couldn't help but smile sweetly. Just like this, the two of them held hands and fell into a sweet dream. The next morning, when Luo Ye woke up, the silver-haired girl was already lying on his chest. Looking at the border that was completely torn apart by AI Lizzie, the boy sighed slightly, but he didn't pursue the matter. The main reason for this decision was naturally that Luo Ye didn't want to become enemies with the people from the country of knights, and another reason was that the responsibility of the enforcers was to maintain the stability of the academy. Although Williams and the others said that, at least until now, their actions didn't cause any harm to the order of the academy. Explosive spell learning and practice class. This was one of the classes in Luo Ye's class schedule, and it was famous for its long name. It was a prerequisite class for the spell practice class, and its purpose was to train the extraordinaire spell casting speed. It was a class that leaned more towards actual combat. Another grading standard for this class was the destructive power of the instantaneous explosive spell casting. After all, speed alone wasn't enough to solve the problem. Sufficient destructive power was needed to defeat the enemy on the battlefield, otherwise, there was a high probability of being killed by the enemy who was driven to desperation. Luo Ye's explosive spell casting was an advantage that even Lillian, who didn't have a good relationship with him, praised endlessly. Not to mention the students, even the teacher of this class couldn't compare with him. If it wasn't for the fact that this class was compulsory, Luo Ye would have skipped it directly. After all, it was really a waste of time for him. As a student who skipped 1/3 of the class, even if there was a reason for it, Luo Ye still felt a little guilty, so he decided to have a proper attitude during the exam. But what he didn't expect was that when the class started, an unexpected figure appeared under the guidance of the teacher. It was the transfer student, Williams. Transfer student. In the last row of the classroom, a black-haired boy and a figure in armor looked at each other from afar. Their gazes weren't sharp, but they only had eyes for each other. Luo Ye thought so in his heart, but these thoughts weren't important to the old teacher George. After a brief introduction of Williams, the white-bearded old man announced the official start of the exam class. But what surprised Luo Ye and all the students was that the target of their spells wasn't the target of the training ground, but a goose. Looking at the goose that was grabbed by the neck by the old man, George, and brought to an open area, the students were puzzled for a moment. However, George didn't care about the students' reaction. He cast spells to block the pecking of the big white goose and calmly said to the students, "Let's go." After saying that, the old man walked to a table and sat down. The confident students began to line up one by one to show off their skills. For a moment, flames and thunder appeared one after another, and the sound of explosions was deafening. Within a second, the spells that the students released violently bombarded the goose-splitting geese, causing explosions. After each explosion, the number of geese on the ground would change accordingly. After a big fireball, 5 small geese appeared on the scorched ground, and then they gathered together in a flash of light. Seeing this magical scene, the students were shocked, but they didn't have any more worries. Thus, one by one, the Cursemancers who used geese as their combat power unit were born. Check 2 geese. The armored knight walked to the side of the weapon rack and casually picked up an ordinary long sword. In the next moment, the atmosphere around Williams changed. Yes, the Cursemancer aside, the knight's sword was a close-range attack. If it was a long-range attack, the curse power could be released, but naturally, it wasn't as strong as directly attached to the sword. In fact, many students in the classroom also rushed up to attack, but looking at the target in the distance, Williams didn't have any intention of approaching. Not going over? Do you still need to use a sword at such a long distance? The violent fluctuation of the curse power caused a buzzing sound. When the long sword slashed down, there was no light flying out. Instead, it left an extremely condensed long line of light in the eyes of everyone. In the next moment, the target in the distance was instantly blasted into thousands of pieces by countless magic elements, floating in the air like powder. Williams, out of the range of measurement, full marks. So this is the Heart Sword sect? Mr. Luo Ye, what do you think of my strength? Facing Williams' question, Luo Ye thought for a moment and replied with a smile. However, what he didn't expect was that his plain words made the armored figure very happy, and then he directly gave a suggestion. Hearing Williams's invitation again, the black-haired young man couldn't help but be slightly stunned and thought silently. Chapter 382. On the lawn, the armored girl looked at the young man who was smiling at her. Her heart was beating fast and she couldn't help but extend her sincere invitation. That's right. In the eyes of the girl, one of the reasons why Luo Ye didn't immediately join forces with her was because she hadn't displayed enough strength yet. For this reason, she found an opportunity to display a part of her strength today, and this indeed earned Luo Ye's praise. "I'm sorry, Your Highness Williams. Thank you for your invitation, but I don't have such plans for now." Hearing Luo Ye's reply, the girl fell into silence for a moment. However, what she didn't expect was Luo Ye's next words. "Your Highness Williams, last night I went to look for the Dean, who is also the former guardian of the Twilight Sage Association, Antonio. I had a conversation with him and learned about the situation and ideals of the country of knights. I give you my highest respect for your perseverance." Hearing Luo Ye's words, the girl in the armor couldn't help but reveal a surprised expression. The identity of Guardian Antonio was a highly confidential information even in the country of knights. Williams found it unbelievable that Luo Ye knew about him. However, The young man's next words made her widen her eyes. Untimely? What do you mean? That kind of thing isn't necessary. In the past countless years, the Twilight Sage Association has been maintaining order in the dark and left behind glorious results. I don't think there's anything wrong with this model. Moreover, most of the crises don't require so many useless people. Just a few elites can solve it. That's right, it's you and me. I'm talking about your tribe and the Dawn Association. Indeed, for most of the crises, the role of high-tier transcendence is far beyond that of low-tier transcendence. The difference in strength between them can't be made up with numbers. However, in some special situations, the situation is the opposite. For example, the situation at the borders hasn't been optimistic in recent years. For that kind of thing, we can just join hands when the time comes. After the Twilight Sage Guild has disappeared for hundreds of years, I believe that the most important thing is to follow the tradition and re-establish the spirit of chivalry that is centered on protection and not moved by fame and fortune. As long as we have such determination, although following the tradition of 1,000 years ago is admirable, if we don't keep up with the times, how is it different from the unchangeable ancestral teachings? Only talk about the spirit and not the material? I don't think that's the right thing to do. Selfless dedication is admirable, but the right thing to do is to be rewarded. I don't think that willpower alone can sustain such determination for a long time. For thousands of years, the Kobnit family has always kept the tradition in mind and cultivated the next generation with the spirit of chivalry. I have also paid a lot for this. Mr. Luoya, are you questioning me and my family? Upon hearing William's words, Luoya couldn't help but be slightly taken aback. He stared at the heavy armor in front of him and suddenly recalled the difficulties Teresa had mentioned to him. Thinking of this, the youth's expression changed as he hastily replied. There seems to be a quarrel over there? The crowd began to whisper among themselves, but neither of them cared. At this time, Luoya was thinking of a way to change Williams's mind, while the girl recalled the girls who had always been by Williams's side. She had some ideas in her mind. Chapter 383. Young warriors, today is the day to pursue your dreams. After half a year of continuous promotion, the long-awaited Challengers Cup finally opened today. Whether it was the contestants or the spectators who came from afar, it had reached an all-time high. The attention of the higher-ups of various countries was also attracted. The special approval of the first years added fuel to the fire of this lively event. The Challengers Cup preliminaries were held in more than 10 locations selected from the numerous secret realms of the scholar country. As for which group was assigned to which location, it was randomly assigned. Just like how everyone's talent in curses would be different, different locations would have a huge impact on a cursemancer, especially the difference between land and water. In the past, among the contestants who drew the maze cliff, there had been situations where some cursemancers who were good at water battles defeated the seeded contestants. The difference in location was the biggest impact, followed by the influence of equipment in the unrestricted spell ranking battles. After that, there were people like Luoya who had special bloodlines or special spells. They might be able to display more shocking strength in certain aspects than their opponents who were at level 3 of the source rank. In Luoya's case, he didn't even make it into the top 10. From this, it could be seen that the rankings were quite exaggerated. However, this was also related to the fact that Luoya didn't go all out during his time in the academy. Under the nervous gaze of the crowd, the spell power of the image finally dissipated and finally stopped at a dark area. Oh no, I've never been to the swamp. Such situations were repeated as the locations were announced. Soon, it was Luoya's turn to be in the 6th group. Why is it that damn place? Hearing the 6th group's location, Luoya's side burst into an uproar. The students who had already formed cliques had ugly expressions after hearing the news. Some of the more timid ones even began to shrink back. The black-haired boy could understand this. After all, the Temple of Silence wasn't very popular. There were skeletons among Shiya's monsters, so naturally, there were also things like ghosts. Generally speaking, the probability of these things appearing naturally in peacetime was very low. Luoya had never seen them before because the country he lived in dealt with them well. That's it? Amidst the noisy crowd, Luoya quietly listened to the elimination matches of all the groups. Apart from him, the others seemed to be normal. After the selection of the venues was completed, the tens of thousands of contestants left the venue under the guidance of the staff. They began to move toward the entrance of the secret territory. The curtains of the preliminary round finally opened amidst the cheers of the audience. In the country of scholars, many students had the misconception that the nearby secret realm belonged to the country of scholars. However, this idea was wrong. The Temple of Silence was rumored to be the old site of an ancient civilization, but no one knew exactly what civilization it was. After countless years of erosion, almost no clues could be found, which was why it was casually used as a competition venue. Chapter 384. At the edge of the forest and the ruins, the black-haired young man who was wrapped in yellow curses stared at the brown-haired girl in front of him, dumbfounded. On the other side, Selena held a long sword in her hand, not knowing what to do. The lawless origin substance gave Selena a spear that could break through all curses, but no matter how good the weapon was, it was useless if one didn't know how to use it. That was why the Batet family's battle power was actually driven by two cores. One was the origin substance, and the other was the bloodline of a sacred beast from ancient times. But what if one of them was removed? In the past, only Selena's father could suppress the restless bloodline in the girl's body with absolute strength, allowing Selena to enjoy a period of peace. That was why when her bloodline was suppressed and her brain suddenly became clear, Selena blurted out the word father. But soon, the girl realized that something was wrong. There was no need for the help of medicine, and there was no pain. Her bloodline calmed down in an instant, and it was at the moment when Selena's battle intent was at its strongest and she was about to swing her sword. In this situation, the biggest possibility was that the other party's bloodline was the same as hers, and far superior to hers. No, that's impossible. What did you do? How did it feel to be called father all of a sudden? It was quite sudden. It was probably because of the advice of the goddess of fate. I felt a familiar aura, so I came out to take a look. I didn't expect to find something unexpected. Is this a bloodline of the same kind? Yes, this little girl has the bloodline of a sacred beast. The black-haired young man was stunned when he heard Pei Tila's words. He didn't expect that even a sacred beast could mix with the bloodline of a human. But after thinking about it carefully, he wasn't that surprised. After all, in terms of size and racial differences, William's dragon bloodline was similar. Sensing Luoya's thoughts, Pei Tila gave such an explanation, and Luoya finally understood why Selena was panicking. Looking at Selena, whose hair stood on end when she felt Pei Tila's gaze, Luoya finally understood the current situation. He looked at the girl whose murderous aura had dissipated and finally understood the intention of this advice. Luoya, who was thinking this, looked at the brown-haired girl who was holding a weapon and shaking her tail with a conflicted expression. After thinking for a moment, he spoke with a serious expression. What do you mean? If I'm not mistaken, His Highness Williams won't allow you to attack me in the preliminary round. As a transfer student of the Country of Knights and a member of the Dawn Association, Miss Serena, you don't seem to be listening to His Highness Williams' orders. Chapter 385. For the preliminary round, all the contestants and the audience might not be very passionate, but they would never have any worries because it was basically absolutely safe. The excessive damage of the substitute curse vessel did not refer to the severity of the eliminated person's injury, but it referred to the curse power content and strength when the curse vessel was destroyed. For example, Selena's waist slash was more serious than the curse attack of other cursemancers. However, the curse power content and strength were obviously higher than the fireball created by the curse vessel. Although Luoya was very concerned about other people's situation after the preliminary round, he was not worried about the safety of his relatives and friends. Therefore, he was particularly shocked when he heard that Paul was injured in the preliminary round. In the preliminary round of the Challenger Cup, there were not many scenes that the audience could see. After all, there were more than 10 venues where tens of thousands of people were fighting at the same time. It was basically a situation where the smoke of war was everywhere. The venue in the secret realm was too large, so only the most intense battles could be shown to the audience who were excited because of the opening ceremony. In this year's preliminary round, the most broadcast was the 10th group. Therefore, for Paul's advancement, Luo Ye actually did not have much confidence. The faction did not put any pressure on him. Paul himself also participated in the Challenger Cup with the participation mentality. However, what was unexpected was that the 10th group, which was originally inconspicuous, had someone eyeing him in advance. It was Gelt, one of the two males from the country of Knights. For the students, when they saw the transfer students from the country of Knights, they would definitely notice him first, but they would not take a second look at him after that. After all, compared with others, he was really a bit ordinary. However, it was this unattractive guy who became the shocking dark horse in the preliminary round and also became Paul's obstacle. Paul's source substance was the kingdom of the Achaemen tribe. It could be used as the royal source substance by the Achaemen tribe, which showed its high quality. However, as the saying goes, cultivation depends on the individual. Even if they had the same source substance, the extraordinary power would develop in different directions according to each person's situation and understanding. It was just like everyone used the same set of textbooks in university, but the papers they wrote were different. As for Paul, he was still a farmer last year. Whether it was his understanding of origin substances or his thoughts, he naturally couldn't reach Lillian's level. But as the main character of the original work, he had his own abilities. With this ability, Paul successfully rushed out of the forest and approached the cave where the advancement crystal was stored. However, he didn't expect to be ambushed by Gelt there. What was even more surprising was Gelt's ability, which was similar to a gigantification curse. Part of the gigantification was indeed awe-inspiring, and the target he wanted to attack was indeed only Paul. However, under the Rolling Stones, the aftermath of the impact affected many of the top players who had rushed out of the forest. Paul saw this opportunity and had a bright idea. He loudly spread the rumor that Gelt wanted to monopolize the 10 crystals. For a moment, the crowd was agitated, and everyone joined forces to attack Gelt. After listening to the situation of the 10th group, Roja's face turned gloomy. The members of the faction didn't dare to make any noise. They quickly rushed to the entrance of the forest and found that the field was already filled with people lying on the ground. Most of the contestants were injured by the overdose of the poison. What was going on? Why was he so happy when he was injured and eliminated? Brother Luo Ye. Just now, the referee of the competition came over and told me that they judged that I obtained the crystal to reach the advancement requirement of 10 minutes. After the substitute was damaged, they announced that I successfully advanced. The black-haired teenager widened his eyes when he heard Paul's words. After asking, he knew that Paul had successfully obtained a crystal in the melee and held on for 10 minutes. But before he could leave the field, he was attacked by Gelt's curse power. As a result, his substitute was destroyed, and the aftermath also caused damage to Paul at that time. Listening to the excited noises of the nearby faction members, Luo Ye breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, his heart relaxed a lot. He was even happier than when he advanced. Because the significance of this Challenger's Cup was far more important to Paul than others. Paul himself might not have thought of this, but as a friend, Luo Ye was very clear. Therefore, during this period of time, the teenager focused on training him. But what Luo Ye didn't expect was that because of the dispute with the Knight's country, Paul actually became one of the targets of the other party, and he was almost eliminated because of it. The teenager with dark clouds in his heart thought so and decided to take action immediately. Chapter 386. After comforting Paul for a while, Luo Ye heard that it was only a minor injury. After confirming that it would not affect the next match, Luo Ye immediately began to check the competition list to see if there were other people in the same situation as Paul who encountered the transfer student. As a result, there were 2 matches. This seems to be fine? In the first match, when Nua Iyer and Juliana met, The nature of their curse power determined that Juliana couldn't take advantage of them. Combined with Nuair's own strength, it could be judged that there was no danger. It was better to say that Miss Angel didn't find trouble with them. Luoya knew what was going on in this match. Probably Geralt was running for his life now, but the two of them would probably not give the qualification to others. However, after this breakthrough, there were two Source-level 4 people in the Green Rose faction. As the deputy minister, Geralt also became the face of the faction and the department. This competition was a task given by Luoya. He also promised that he would do his best, so there shouldn't be any problems. After looking at the list of people, Luoya sent contact people to these two groups to be on the safe side. Luoya himself went to the venue with Paul and other winners of the primary to register and receive medals. 1 second, remember 99% elimination rate. This probability could be said to be a real army crossing a single plank bridge. It didn't seem excessive to give a commemorative medal to the players who rushed out. However, when they were registering and receiving the medal, a tall figure made many students, including Paul, change their faces. What is this guy doing? Seeing Geralt approaching, the students around Luoya were a little nervous for a while, but the other party didn't mean to be violent at all. The tall man stopped in front of Luoya and others. He looked at Paul, who was staring at him, and didn't speak. After a moment of silence, he turned his gaze to Luoya. Talk alone? Okay, let's go over there. Mr. Luoya, I heard that the skeleton you used was a giant named Goulandair. Is this true? When the black-haired youth heard Geralt's question, he calmly replied with a question. Mr. Luoya, I'm afraid you don't know this, but the name Goulandair is not glorious in our clan's records. He is a tyrant and a degenerate. He is an extremely evil person. I suggest you cut off all contact with him immediately. Hearing Geralt's words, Luoya's brows wrinkled. He looked at the tall man in front of him, thinking about his words, and couldn't help but feel unhappy. That's right. He's a famous criminal in the records of our clan. His name is very special, so it shouldn't be wrong. Fallen ones are good at disguising themselves. You might not know much about him. Hearing the tall man's words, the black-haired youth refuted with a rare look of anger. Geert said in a low voice, "Oh, history. I really didn't expect someone to talk about history with our race. Then let me ask you, Mr. Geralt, do you know how much of the history you read is true and how much is false?" Chapter 387. After the conflict with Geralt, Luoya calmed down his anger, readjusted his state of mind, and fell into deep thought. Undead creatures were a race that was naturally rejected by humans. Most of them had no sense of reason at all. In ancient times, they were tempted to fall into depravity. There weren't many of them, but the problem was that not all undead creatures were evil, especially the higher-level ones. They were less affected by the undead attribute and could choose their own side. In the distant ancient times, the mythical races were united by the side of the Creator, Shia. They were chosen by the Creator, and one of them was the undead. If the undead could only do evil, Shia would have wiped them out long ago unless he was a necrophiliac. There were too many possible guesses as to why the Goulandair was described as an evil god who committed all kinds of crimes. The most likely reason was that it was slandered by later generations. However, the specific details would have to be asked by the person involved. After waiting in the venue for nearly an hour, the preliminary round of the dozen groups finally ended. Through the reports of the faction members, Luoya had a general understanding of the situation so far. It could be seen that Juliana was different from Geralt. She didn't carry out Williams's orders well. She was the type who prioritized her own interests. On the other hand, Brittany was even more so. But to a certain extent, she resolutely carried out Williams's orders. Outside the secret realm of Group 12, Jello, who had completed the preliminary round, looked like he was paralyzed. According to the gray-haired young man, Brittany didn't care about the others at all. She chased after him like a mad dog. Jello had been running for more than 3 hours, and he knelt on the ground as soon as he came out of the door. As a first-year faction that wasn't qualified to participate in the competition, including Paul, who unexpectedly advanced, 3 of the Green Rose members made it into the semifinals. This was undoubtedly exciting. According to Luo Ya's knowledge, the Nua Iyer and Xia Luo's gold and red factions had gathered so many nobles, but no more than 5 of them made it to the semifinals. Luo Ya commented as he looked at the excited members of Blue Rose. However, he did not immediately congratulate them as he still had other matters to attend to. The Armor Hall was the name of this building. It was said that it was the residence of an old teacher who was obsessed with knight culture and spirit. After his death, he donated it to St. Freya Academy. The entire hall had more than 100 sets of knight armor and weapons. It could be called a small knight culture museum. Without a doubt, this was a preferential treatment for Williams and the others who didn't participate in the entrance exam and didn't have any actual achievements. The outside world had also criticized this before. However, now that the 7 people from the country of knights had all advanced, these voices of dissatisfaction quickly disappeared. Through the open door, the blonde Brittany was surprised to see the young man outside. Luo Ya also revealed his purpose. Your Highness Williams, in the preliminary round of the Challengers Cup, the transfer students from the country of knights attacked the contestants from the Green Rose faction. As far as I know, this seems to be your order. Can you explain? It's not against the rules, but as a student of St. Freya Academy, I don't think this kind of internal strife is worth promoting, especially in such an important competition. Facing the black-haired young man's questioning, Williams, who was wearing armor, said so without showing the slightest apology. Instead, he asked Luo Ya a question. Your Highness Williams, perhaps in your eyes, this method is indeed unfair, but according to the rules of the Challengers Cup, the tournament recognizes and allows friendly students to help each other. In official words, connections and luck are also part of one's strength. In fact, during the tournament, there are indeed student groups that gather with the academy as a unit. Chapter 388. Depraved. Gelt did say this word. When he clashed with Gelt, Luo Ya ignored some details due to his inner anger. One of them was the meaning of depraved. The youth originally thought that Gelt called the Gulandair depraved because of the appearance of the giant skeleton, but after discussing with Pei Tila and others, Luo Ya suddenly felt something was wrong. Savior. Regarding this question, Pei Tila was silent for a moment before shaking his head, showing a puzzled look. The ancient Mother Earth recalled the past and said so. On the other side, the witch narrowed her scarlet eyes and ridiculed. Witch, are you provoking me? Hearing Pei Tila's angry retort, Altacia exaggeratedly stroked her chest and ran to Luo Ya's side, then whispered, You're not a princess but a queen, right? And you're the one who provoked me first, right? Facing Luo Ya's unmoved retort, the white-haired witch showed a dissatisfied expression, while Pei Tila stared at her angrily. After wasting a lot of time, Luo Ya pulled the conversation back to the main topic. Generally, there are 2 kinds of concepts. One is the depraved gods who pursued power after Shiya's death. The other is the pitiful creatures who were influenced by the Savior's depravity. That is the difference between active and passive. After listening to Altacia's words, Luo Ya couldn't help but ponder. From his subjective point of view, it was impossible for the Gulandair to actively deprave when he was alive, and from an objective point of view, this point was also the same. Therefore, the Gulandair should be innocent, but the giant's bloodline called him a depraved. Did it mean that his life and even his death had something to do with the Savior? In Shiya's history, there weren't many races that liked to record their past in various ways. The giants mostly passed down their history orally, and there was a high probability of mishearing or misunderstanding when passing down a story. By the time someone actually summed up the history in a book, it would probably be long gone. After asking around, Luo Ya, who didn't get any constructive opinions, dismissed the discussion among the gods. He decided to find a way to search for books in this area in the future. After a rest, the teenager walked out of the room and went to the banquet hall to prepare for the celebration. As a result, he saw Paul, who was wearing a strange armor, explaining something to the onlookers. Oh, the patterns on it are so beautiful. Luo Ya, who was well versed in history, had heard of the Forest Legion of the ancient Austin Empire. It was formed during the Empire's most powerful period, mainly to deal with the beast tide in the forest area of the Empire. In the early days of the Empire, humans adopted a defensive war, hoarding food and closing the city. But with the development of the Empire, the expansion of the soldiers, the improvement of weapons and equipment, and strength, people gradually didn't want to take a defensive position. Every year, they were besieged for 1 or 2 months. The Forest Legion was born to turn defense into offense. This was the first time in human history that the large-scale beast tide, which was rated as the same level as natural disasters such as floods and earthquakes in the past, was successfully eliminated. There was no doubt that it was a milestone and a symbol of the peak of human civilization. However, it could also be said to be the peak of the ancient Austin Empire. The stories of heroes were no longer told by people. The descendants of the frontier knights gradually became addicted to sensual pleasures, and the pursuit of fame and fortune became the goal of the later generations. Humans lost their unity and became a pile of loose sand amidst the increasingly intense internal strife. All kinds of corruption began to proliferate, and in the end, the entire empire became rotten. When the ancestors of Ald watched the glory of the empire fade in the dark, what kind of feelings did they have in their hearts? Forest fairies. The name of this armor should be given by the designer at that time according to the fairy tales of the fairies who came and went without a trace in the forest. But in Luo Ya's ears, it was very strange, especially when the young boy saw Paul doing bodybuilding exercises to show off his muscle-strengthening ability. Oh, this kind of camouflage can be activated while moving? He felt that something was wrong. What exactly was it? Wait a minute, in the original work, Paul did summon this armor, but that was when he was close to the 3rd year, right? How could it be so fast in the real world? If he thought about it this way, it seemed that his speed of improvement was also much faster. After Luo Ya's actions were different from the original work, everyone in the eye of the recorder seemed to have improved faster than the original work. They were already favored by the heavens, but they became more and more demonic. Luo Ya didn't know how to explain this. The young boy blinked and fell into deep thought. On the other side, as students from other departments in the academy came to visit, Paul's side also became noisy. Student Paul, we are the Curse Research Department belonging to the Curse School. Can you let us take a closer look at this perfect armor? Looking at the members of various departments in the academy, the young boy who suddenly became a dark horse in the Challenger Cup competition didn't know what to do for a while. The nearby faction members were also unprepared. Facing the outsiders who kept making requests, Paul became a little embarrassed. Students from various departments visiting, please abide by the order of Tsung Hall. As a participant of the Green Rose faction, Paul Aikman is currently not accepting any interviews. His spell and equipment are also confidential matters before the end of the competition. Please understand. Seeing that one of the ring-bearers, Luo Ya, came forward, the students who made all kinds of outrageous requests stopped and dispelled the idea of making a big news. The crowd gradually dispersed. Paul, who was relieved, looked at the young boy in front of him who blocked the crowd for him. He felt warm in his heart and hurriedly thanked him. It's normal. Most people are like this when they are suddenly surrounded. It will be fine after a while. Can you let others wear this thing? Hearing Luo Ya's question, Paul smiled bitterly, then explained, I see. The magical weapon of the ancient Austin Empire in the Second Era was the achievements of most of the top curse research in human history. If it could be successfully replicated by Paul, it would be of great significance to promote the current curse equipment, especially now when the mutants were restless. After asking Luo Ya at the award ceremony not long ago, Melty proved that she was not joking. She really joined the Green Rose faction. As a senior and one of the members of the Academy's orchestra, the talented girl with good temperament was warmly welcomed and quickly integrated into the group. As an outsider of the Academy, Elisa wasn't allowed to live in the Blue Hall. This was because it would violate the Academy's rules. Usually, it would be fine if she was only a member of the faction and no one would speak of this matter. But today, a large group of outsiders had come, so it would be very dangerous for Elisa to show her face. The helpless young boy took a sip of wine and celebrated with Paul and Gerlach. However, to his surprise, Paul didn't eat and drink as usual at today's banquet. Instead, he looked a little strange. Senior? Junior Luoya, I'm here as the representative of the Aikman family. Thank you for your help to family member Paul Aikman. Because the Purple Rose faction's banquet has just ended, it seems that I didn't have time to inform you in advance. Please forgive me. The black-haired young boy said with a smile on his face. He cooperated well with Lillian's official tone. In the eyes of outsiders, it was completely polite. As for Paul, the agent didn't participate in the conversation between the two. He just pulled a chair and put it next to Luoya's seat. You can actually use the kingdom source substance like this. This is really beyond my expectation. Your situation is also very rare in the history of our family. Listening to the question and answer between Lillian and Paul, Luoya, who couldn't interrupt, raised his eyebrows. After thinking for a moment, the young boy turned his head and wanted to chat with Gerlach, but before he could speak, the tentative fingers under the table suddenly touched him. In the lively banquet under everyone's gaze, the black-haired girl smiled and held the young boy's hand dexterously. Chapter 389. Amidst the lively banquet, Luoya stared at the gray-haired young man with widened eyes. On the other hand, Gerlach looked dubious. He naturally didn't know what kind of heartbeat Luoya was going through at that moment. Head, what's wrong? Why is your face so red? It has indeed gotten hotter in the past few days. As the person who was the furthest away from Luoya geographically, Lillian could only spend time with the young man in the academy and couldn't see him in public. This could be considered a major disadvantage. But Lillian also had her own advantages. She had Paul as a top-notch insider. In a situation where the other young ladies couldn't attend due to faction affairs, Lillian arrived first as Paul's relative. The feeling of sneaking ahead was undoubtedly exhilarating, especially under the watchful eyes of everyone. Before this, as her XP was triggered, Lillian could do whatever she wanted to Luoya, whose side effects were reduced. But now, the side effects were gone forever. Facing the young man in his normal state, Lillian didn't have the courage to be too proactive. But compared to the passion back then, the warmth between the two of them was enjoyable. Remember this for a second. The black-haired young lady felt this rare happiness. Her purple pupils couldn't help but narrow slightly. She knew that she shouldn't laugh so casually, but the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up. And in the eyes of Paul, who was covering for her, this change was even more obvious. It was a peculiar feeling similar to virtuousness and even a strong maternal instinct. It was an unknown side of her that would only be revealed when she was with Luoya. It was also due to this obvious change that Paul volunteered to be the go-between between Lillian and Luoya. Gazing at the two of them sitting side by side, Paul revealed a smile and lamented. After his discussion with Lillian about the source substance, the nearby crowd had left as if avoiding suspicion. Gerlach had also gone out to drink with his close friends. With no one around, the young lady could finally whisper to Luoya. "Thank you, senior. You too. Did the preliminary round go well?" The black-haired girl said regretfully. She was still brooding over the fact that she had drawn the grassland terrain in the preliminary round. Luoya couldn't help but laugh. He couldn't help but open his mouth to persuade her. If that's the case, things will be a little difficult. Upon hearing Lillian's unexpected answer, Luoya couldn't help but blink in confusion. The black-haired girl smiled, gently clenched his hand, and whispered in his ear. The girl, whose wish wasn't fulfilled, could only tap Luoya's wrist under the table. Then she couldn't help but sigh. If it's just meeting each other, we can do it every day during class. However, we haven't had many opportunities to meet in private recently. The reason was that as the leader of the faction, they needed to lead the other members of the faction to improve together with them to a certain extent. It felt like a top student helping to tutor others. The improvement of the overall strength of the faction was also an important test for the ringbearers. Senior sister, Green Rose has just started and needs to improve as a whole to get resources, so I've been quite busy recently. Chapter 390. After 2 rounds of easy matches, the seeded players of the Challengers Cup had basically cleared the contestants with average strength, and Luoya was about to face the agreed battle. To some extent, Luoya, who also had some bloodline problems, understood Selena's feelings very well. But on the other hand, the teenager opposed Selena's solution to the bloodline problem. The Batet family's sacred beast bloodline could be controlled. Luoya had learned this in advance, but the opportunity to control the bloodline was different. Some people naturally learned it as they grew older, and some people learned it in battles with strong enemies. Selena's bloodline talent was extremely high, so it was estimated that the latter was the most likely to control the bloodline. If he wanted to help her, he had to defeat her. This competition was the best opportunity because the substitute curse vessel of this Challengers Cup competition could let people clearly experience death. The state between life and death was the closest to a real battle. In the crowded arena, Luoya and Selena were at one end of the arena. In the center, the crystal ball in the hands of the tournament organizer, which constantly changed the venue, lit up again, making the audience excited. Under such a battle analysis, the venue selection became the focus of the audience. However, as if God was playing a joke on Luoya, at the last moment when the constantly changing venue crystal ball reached the finish line, the hilly terrain that was originally quite good was replaced before it was locked, turning into a dark rainforest. 1 second remember, oh, 50 gold coins. Bet on that little girl. With the efforts of the majority of gamblers, Luoya's odds began to soar. At one end of the arena, the silver-haired girl frowned worriedly. It's very simple. Because the darkness of this secret realm, perpetual night forest, is accompanied by curse power, ordinary night vision spells are very ineffective. TSK, I didn't expect to draw such a place. Should I say that things don't go as planned? Perhaps a few months ago, Luoya would have some concerns about dueling with Selena in such a place, but now it was different because Luoya no longer had 2 ancient gods, but 3. After the announcement of the entrance was made, Luoya and Selena's bodies were surrounded by light. When they opened their eyes again, the black-haired teenager saw complete darkness. After officially entering the competition, Luoya found that the situation in the perpetual night forest was worse than expected. Facing such an unfavorable environment, Luoya did not move a step, nor did he use any spells. Instead, he immediately chose to release the Hydra staff in his hand. The origin form, Disorder, gave Luoya a strong penetrative ability. This was the thing that had left the deepest impression on him in the previous 2 matches. Under this ability that almost ignored defense, 2 strong contestants had been killed in a single blow. However, after carefully studying the principle behind it, Luoya found that the Hydra staff could still be used. With the full infusion of curse power, the Hydra staff emitted a sparkling light. 9 intimidating snakes emerged from the staff and surrounded the teenager as if he was a king. Then, a defensive rock wall emitting a pale yellow curse power was erected at the outermost periphery. In Luoya's eyes, this was the battle that had the hope of reversing the situation of Selena's bloodline. In the girl's eyes, this battle was even more crucial because her strong beast instinct told her that Luoya was the strongest opponent she had ever encountered. Although they had not met for long, as one of the few people who had spoken to her when her bloodline had calmed down, Luoya understood her thoughts and promised to fight with all his strength. What was even rarer was that this arena seemed to be tailor-made for Selena. Passionate hot blood flowed through her body along with the determination to fight. Her holy beast bloodline was stimulated to the limit by Selena at this moment. With the crisp sound of bones cracking, beast ears and a tail appeared on the girl's body. Her eyes flashed with a bestial light, and the noise in her brain increased. This battle was almost impossible for Luoya to launch an attack. Selena, who had the advantage of the geographical advantage, had long known this. Before entering the arena, the brown-haired girl had predicted that Luoya would adopt a defensive strategy, so she had thought of a strategy in advance. Clear beastly cries continuously sounded from the girl's mouth. Under the deterrence of a holy beast's aura, the magical creatures in the forest began to submit and move under Selena's command. That is too strong. The outcome of this battle is already decided. As expected of the Batet family's once-in-a-century genius, to be able to mobilize so many magical creatures in such a short period of time. The judges of the competition began to express their opinions, and almost all of them thought that Luoya was at a serious disadvantage. However, at the highest point of the ceremonial stage, Antonio, who was listening to the official's high-pitched speech, had a different expression in his eyes. The old man looked at the youth in the arena and blinked, then smiled after a moment. The roars of magical creatures sounded from all directions, and Paytila's outermost defense began to be attacked from all directions. Due to the number of magical creatures, the Hydra protecting Luoya had no choice but to move its huge body and spray its venom outwards. For a moment, the roars and screams of magical creatures filled the air. After the magical creatures in the sky moved, the Hydra could no longer maintain a complete defense. At this moment, the black-haired youth had no choice but to make a move. Against Luoya, who had the king of sacred beasts following him, the magical creatures were completely useless. This was something that Selena already knew. However, even though the magical creatures weren't a threat, they could still cause him to reveal his flaws. The moment Paytila's aura intimidated the magical creatures, the brown-haired young lady in the darkness suddenly activated her bloodline. At this moment, the curse power in Selena's body was like an explosive, violently reacting in a way that was close to self-harming. The brown-haired young lady was only a few hundred meters away from Luoya in the blink of an eye. The young lady's body fell to the ground like a meteor, consecutively chopping off 2 snake heads and pouncing towards the youth in the center of the formation. It was as if she had taken the head of a general in the midst of thousands of soldiers. At this moment, Luoya seemed to have recovered from his shock. Looking at the astonished youth under the long sword, Selena was almost certain that she had won. However, the next scene that happened made her widen her eyes in shock. Not good. He hasn't lost yet. The all-out attack of both sides clashed head-on just like that. At the next moment, the collision of the curse power shook the entire secret realm, erupting with extreme sound and light. The loud sound of the explosion shook the atmosphere and turned it into a shockwave. The intense light illuminated the forest as if it was daytime. The nocturnal monsters screamed in this upheaval, and the audience outside the arena also exclaimed. The silver-haired young lady cheered happily in the audience. After a moment of judgment and verification, the tournament referees announced on the screen. Oh. In the arena, the black-haired youth looked at the young lady who had collapsed to the ground due to excessive damage and the exhaustion of her curse power and asked her how she felt. Are you satisfied? As expected, you purposely attacked me in the end, right? The black-haired youth said in a flat tone. Selena smiled and narrowed her eyes. Somehow, she felt that he wasn't that annoying. I feel like I'm full all of a sudden. I don't want to fight anymore. You can say that. The excited spectators became even noisier after seeing the return of the 2 contestants. They raised their hands and applauded for the final all-out collision between the 2 contestants. The medical staff rushed forward and lifted Selena onto a stretcher. Luoya was required to undergo a post-match examination according to the rules. I've fulfilled my promise, haven't I? Thinking so, the black-haired youth looked at Selena in the distance and revealed a smile. But what surprised him was that at this moment, the system prompt suddenly sounded. Chapter 391. Ding, don't refuse AI Lizzie Akat's request tonight. Tonight, I can't refuse AI Lizzie's request? Previously, the small suggestions generated by the blessing of the goddess of fate were within the scope of what he could implement. It wouldn't have much impact if he followed the suggestions, but this time, don't refuse AI Lizzie's request. This is definitely not okay. Forget it, let's take one step at a time. 1 second. Remember, without the substitute curse vessel being completely damaged, Luoya hardly suffered any substantial damage, so he just checked it a little and left. The young man who walked out of the arena was warmly welcomed by the faction members, and he learned one thing. That was his odds had skyrocketed. As a result, Luoya's odds rose all the way until the beginning of the game. Such high odds made Luoya, who heard about it, stunned. He almost burst into tears for a while. As a seeded player, Luo Ye's usual odds were only about 1-3, which was pitifully low. This was also the reason why he didn't bet on winning or negative betting time. Thinking that he had tripled more than 100,000 gold coins in one game, Luo Ye was excited for a while. Judging from this situation, he might be able to pay back the money he owed Xia Luot before the Challenger Cup ended. Now the tournament had reached the top 32. The transfer students of the country of knights and Luo Ye's acquaintances had not been eliminated yet. Even the weakest Paul actually survived 2 rounds with his ability to summon divine armament. The ocean field was generally considered a neutral field. After all, most people had no experience in ocean battles. Originally, the opponent thought that this kind of field was very disadvantageous for both sides. He could win with stronger strength. As a result, he didn't expect Paul to change armor on the spot. He directly transformed into the ancient Austin Empire Navy and exhausted his opponent to death with the advantage of the field and equipment. For Paul's situation, Luo Ye could only say that he was lucky. He even suspected that this guy had activated some kind of protagonist aura. In contrast, Gerlach on the other side was much more difficult. Although he successfully survived 2 rounds, both rounds were tough battles. For example, in the last street battle, Xia Luot's opponent was a cursemancer who was good at large-scale attack spells. The bloodline ability was to hide the spell fluctuations to a certain extent. After discovering that Xia Luot's golden soul was good at defense, the top student trained by Leinster College decided to hide and make a big move. He wanted to win with full power, but he didn't expect to be attacked at the beginning. Compared with Xia Luot's slightly more interesting game, Nua Iyer and Lillian were somewhat similar. They directly defeated their opponents with their strength. As for the transfer students, they each had their own characteristics. Among them, the most eye-catching one was Teresa. She defeated her opponents with spells in both elimination rounds. This year's Challengers Cup was amazing because of the outstanding performance of the first years. Roja and the others led the faction cadres and the transfer students. Out of the 100 or so people who passed the preliminaries, nearly 20 of them made it to the Challengers Cup. In the top 32, they made it to the Challengers Cup. In Shiya, the teaching of different places was not uniform. The teaching content of St. Fran Academy in the country of knights and St. Freya Academy in the country of scholars was very different. This led to the situation where 7 people had to start from the first year. For example, Gelt, who had the giant's bloodline, was actually already a 3rd year at St. Fran Academy. Before the arrival of Luo Ye, these 2 ringbearers had always followed Purple Rose Lillian's lead. Grimm himself was born in the Austin Empire. Because he believed in the pure blood theory, he became a hardcore supporter of Lillian. Edward, on the other hand, was born in a small country in the buffer zone of the Austin Empire. Naturally, he didn't dare to disobey Her Royal Highness, who might become the next emperor. This time, the 2 ringbearers also entered the top 32. Edward was the 2nd seeded player. He was very calm in the previous 2 battles and was generally favored by the outside world. Paul met Juliana in the 3rd round. This beautiful girl with black hair and red eyes had a far better understanding of dark spells than her level. She was completely at the master level. However, as a conjurer from the country of knights, Juliana naturally had an additional layer of warrior attributes. Her weapon was an ominous heavy sword. However, this girl who seemed to be a vampire was obviously not a pretty face. In the battle with Paul, Juliana's luck was not good. When she drew the venue, she drew the rainforest, which was the most suitable venue for Paul's forest sprite armor. However, what everyone did not expect was that Juliana's curse talent was even more powerful. This kind of wide area search spell was actually not very powerful in terms of spell power, but its operation difficulty was too high. Generally speaking, it required several conjurers to cooperate to complete it. However, Juliana completed it alone with ease. The moment she caught Paul, she performed Shadow Shift and appeared behind him. Then, her greatsword flashed and cut Paul in half. Obviously, the protagonist's halo wasn't as magical as imagined in the real world. Although Paul was lucky all the way and even drew the best lot in the venue, luck wasn't omnipotent. Juliana proved with facts that strength was always the most reliable. TSK, what kind of smell is this? After Paul's defeat, another deputy minister of the Blue Rose faction also met with a defeat. However, Luoya was not surprised because Gerlach's opponent was Brittany. The gray-haired youth's legs were shaking as soon as he entered the arena. It would be strange if he could win. Rather than letting others kill him, why not let me do it? Gerlach's guts were shattered when he heard Brittany's words. He was even more convinced that there was something wrong with Brittany's mind. However, based on Luoya's experience, she was probably just not good at language. Under Brittany's threat, the cowardly Gerlach was defeated like a landslide. However, to be honest, this did not have much of an impact on the outcome. In terms of strength alone, Brittany, who had the bloodline of the Valkyrie, could not be defeated by a youth who had just reached level 4 of source rank. In that battle, Stuart drew the desert terrain. His opponent was a foreign participant who had rich combat experience. Both of them were at level 4 of source rank. Then, there was a series of spells that were nothing special but very solid. In the end, Stuart lost. Even after his defeat, he did not take off the black cloth covering his eyes. Could it be that his eyes were not used for battle? Although Luoya advanced to the top 16, Paul and Gerlach had just been eliminated, so it was inappropriate to celebrate. In fact, after returning to the residence, Luoya specially consoled them. After realizing the gap in strength between them and their opponents, they both expressed that they would work harder. After chatting with them, Luoya finally had some free time. However, a question arose in his mind. AI Lizzie did not return with him. Instead, she left with teacher Chris before the end of the competition. Luoya returned to his private area with doubts. He did not expect to hear the sound of firecrackers as soon as he opened the door to the dining hall. Big brother, congratulations on your successful advancement. The black-haired boy stared at the two people who were firing the cannons and shooting out colorful paper ribbons. Chris smiled and explained, "That's right. I really didn't expect this. I've never seen this dish before." You guys? Looking at the silver-haired girl who patted her chest and asked for praise, Luoya was stunned for a while. He looked at the dish in front of him, and his heart was filled with emotions. Thinking of this, Luoya suddenly felt like crying. In order to cover it up, he hurriedly picked up the spoon and took a sip. "It's delicious." Hearing AI Lizzie's question, Luoya answered decisively, just like any parent who ate a dish cooked by their child for the first time. But after speaking, the youth found that AI Lizzie's dish was really delicious. Under the dual psychological and physical enjoyment, Luoya drank nearly half of the soup in one breath. AI Lizzie was very happy to see this, and Chris couldn't help but laugh. "So that's how it is. At that time, I wanted to make it for your father, but I didn't have the chance to learn it. I didn't expect that after so many years, it's actually yours." Hearing Chris's complaint, the black-haired youth didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At the same time, seizing the opportunity when Luoya was touched, AI Lizzie hugged the youth's arm and said her request. "Big brother, can you let me stay tonight?" Chapter 392. At the dining table, AI Lizzie seized the opportunity to make a request decisively, while Chris on the other side squinted his eyes and cheered for her in his heart. This time, the behavior of the two was not on the spur of the moment, but they really came prepared. After all, Luoya would advance, and it was not difficult to predict that Paul and others would be eliminated. For this reason, AI Lizzie began to practice with Chris a week ago. Under the pleading of AI Lizzie, Luoya, who was moved in his heart, agreed almost instantly. After agreeing, the young man remembered the advice of the goddess, and he couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. The puzzled young man decided to wait and see, and put these things behind him for the time being. Chris, on the other hand, talked about Kadia's reply. "Well, looking at the date, it was 3 months ago. She said that she thanked me for taking care of you, but to be honest, I don't think I did anything." "Are you praising me?" Remember it in 1 second. If it was according to Dad's thinking, it should be just a polite reply now. The relationship with teacher Chris is probably still at the level of old friends. In this case, teacher Chris still has a long way to go. Under the company of AI Lizzie and Chris, the young man rarely experienced the warmth of a family. After a warm dinner, Chris found an opportunity to give AI Lizzie a look and got up to leave, so only Luoya and AI Lizzie were left in the room. However, it had to be said that Luoya really needed to read some books recently to stabilize his extraordinary power. After all, after the last historical fragment, his strength had advanced by leaps and bounds, and he was close to the limit of source rank 4. However, this kind of leap in progress had an unstable foundation, and an inappropriate consolidation was likely to cause problems. In order to achieve this goal, Luoya needed a lot of historical records to enrich himself. If he was in the Akkad family, it might be a little difficult, but fortunately, he was in St. Freya Academy, and he really couldn't finish reading the resources in the library in a short time. No matter if it was a history book from hundreds of years ago or a scroll from thousands of years ago, no matter if it was a strange story or a serious history, as long as Luoya was by her side, AI Lizzie didn't care. After all, rather than saying that she was reading a book, it was better to say that she was reading a person. Beside the sofa where the lamp was lit, Luoya and the silver-haired girl were sitting side by side. The boy was holding a thick book and slowly flipping through it, while the girl was silently rubbing against his shoulder like a cat. This familiar feeling made Luoya's heart relax. He felt as if he was in the mansion of Akkad Hill. Really, this aspect hasn't changed at all. Since he was a child, Luoya had discovered this characteristic of AI Lizzie. If the girl was divided into liberal arts and science, AI Lizzie was undoubtedly an all-rounder talent. Subjects like mathematics that gave many girls headaches were not difficult at all in AI Lizzie's eyes. Liberal arts and the like were also a piece of cake for her. She was a standard top student. Under this long-term tacit understanding, Luoya and AI Lizzie didn't discuss anything and just snuggled up to each other for a few hours. When it was close to midnight, a strange spell began to come from afar. Juliana felt that she was going to starve to death. As a student of St. Freya Academy, the so-called hunger naturally didn't refer to the hunger of ordinary people due to lack of food, but in fact, it was the cost of using the spell on her body. The Blood Tribe was a famous race in Shiya's ancient times. But compared to other mythical creatures, the Blood Tribe's origin was noble, but their body wasn't that different from humans. Therefore, they could reproduce with humans through ordinary reproduction. Chapter 393. That night, due to the unexpected arrival of the girl, AI Lizzie did not make any excessive requests to Luoya. Instead, she chased her away and went to sleep. That's right. For the current Luoya, sleeping in separate beds was already within her expectations. Fortunately, nothing unexpected happened throughout the night. When she woke up the next morning and felt the girl lying on her chest, Luoya even felt a trace of familiarity. Is it because I haven't seen AI Lizzie for half a year? After the elimination of Selena, the Challengers Cup competition entered its most heated stage. The strongest contestants began their final battle, and St. Freya Academy inevitably began its internal strife. Even the transfer students from the Kingdom of Knights had to face off against their own people one by one. After that, Luoya still did not leave. Instead, she continued to watch the competition and quickly confirmed her next opponent, Gelt. After Gelt transformed into his giant form, he blasted all the trees into the sky with a heavy punch. Juliana completely lost the shadow that she relied on to move. She could only helplessly meet force with force, and naturally, she was defeated by Gelt's iron fist. Gelt! 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 In the midst of the thunderous cheers, the tall man waved his hand and then turned his gaze to Luoya, who was in the audience seat of the Blue Rose Academy. The two of them looked at each other, their eyes cold and filled with battle intent. Will the versatile summoner Luoya emerge victorious, or will the ancient bloodline giant Gelt continue his glory? The hottest competition of the Challengers Cup. Everyone, please place your bets. Time slowly passed in the midst of the burning fighting spirit of the two sides until the day of the competition. After a few days of rest, in the Leinster Battle Arena, The competition that had been hyped by various merchants for nearly a week finally began. As the two sides of the battle, the two of them did not communicate because they understood each other's stubbornness. Words alone would not be able to resolve the dispute between the two of them. Luo Ye even felt that words might be more effective against these giant bloodline users. The ninth field Ash Desert. The Ash Desert was a terrain just like the literal meaning of its name. In the whole secret realm, there were only flying ashes similar to ashes after being burned and the sand of the desert terrain. There was no cover at all to hide. In this place, the two sides could only pursue and fight head-on. Under the expectant gaze of the audience, Luo Ye and Gelt entered the arena. After the baptism of dust and sand, the two figures appeared separately in the open desert, separated by thousands of meters. Gelt's bloodline came from the giants, but his origin substance wasn't the common power of the giants. Instead, it was trace. And just as the name implied, the Gust race's supernatural strength was, to a certain extent, traced back to the origin of their bloodline, which was the history of the giants. In order to gain more power, the Gust race had spent a lot of effort in researching this aspect, and the Gulandair was one of the discoveries they made during their research. On both sides of the desert, Luo Ye and Gelt didn't talk nonsense as they immediately unleashed their full strength. Chapter 394. After finishing his battle with Gelt, Luo Ye's mood improved a lot after hearing Gelt's last words. The anger that was caused by the Gulandair being discredited had mostly dissipated. What? Princess Nua Ayer wants to forfeit? Forfeit? Nua Ayer? Although the importance of the Challengers Cup to princesses like Nua Ayer and Xia Lu was much lower than others, the publicity effect was unparalleled. Moreover, it was already the semi-final stage. How could they forfeit? Luo Ye was puzzled and asked his own question. He didn't expect the female student to be troubled after hearing his question. What? Well, you guys can leave. In the classical and elegant living room, a blonde girl sat alone at the tea table by the balcony. She dismissed the aristocrats in the room and smiled at the approaching youth. Well, I beat up that arrogant guy. But that's not important. I heard that you want to forfeit. What's the matter? Angels were the embodiment of holiness in ancient times. Nua Ayer, who possessed the blood of an angel, shouldn't have any abnormalities. Once there was a problem, it would be a big problem. Nua Ayer, what's the matter? Nostalgia? Nua Ayer's face revealed a smile as she recalled the similar historical situation she experienced with the youth. Luo Ye was surprised when he heard this. He stared at the girl and asked, "Well, the blood is restless. Maybe it's about to advance to gold." Hearing Nua Ayer's answer, Luo Ye couldn't help but widen his eyes. A strange feeling suddenly welled up in his heart. The youth's heart was filled with doubts. Not only did his worries not lessen, but it began to increase instead. Because the advancement of the blood was different from the extraordinary level, it may cause the body to be unable to bear it. In fact, Nua Ayer's condition when she was younger was because she was too young when she advanced. Now that she was advancing to gold, would the situation be more serious? Chapter 395. Although the exchange with Nua Ayer was heartwarming, the recent series of events around him made Luo Ye feel slightly uneasy. However, it had to be said that the doubts in the young man's heart were not supported by any actual situation and seemed to be groundless fears. Soon after, Nua Ayer's decision was made public by the tournament organizers. The Challengers Cup was not just a material reward. The winner would also receive great fame. This kind of fame transcended national boundaries and had a huge impact on a person's future. Fortunately, the people of the theocracy still had a hope, and that was Luo Ye of the Akkad family. After becoming the only contestant from his country, the young man gained a large number of supporters out of thin air. Nua Ayer's incident had a great impact on the tournament, but no one expected that the incident would be overshadowed by an even more explosive piece of news just one day later. Edward of the Grey Rose, who was one of the favorites to win the tournament and ranked second among the seeded contestants, was defeated by Williams. The Heart Sword was unleashed by Williams for the first time in this match. Its effect was shocking, especially the final scene where the blade flew like a meteor and broke through Edward's heavy defense to cut him in half. This caused the audience to cheer. The second level 3 source level contestant in this year's Challengers Cup. Such news almost instantly caused an uproar in the entire tournament because this was the first time there were 2 level 3 source level contestants in the same tournament since the Challengers Cup was held. Under such an atmosphere, praises such as Genius Knight began to appear one after another. William's name caused a great uproar, and his popularity soared like a rocket. He became the favorite to win the tournament. Xia Luo's golden soul could attack and defend freely, but in the face of overwhelming numbers, it did not have enough destructive power. Although Xia Luo's gem curse could make up for this, it was obviously inferior to Lilian's summoning speed. Perhaps due to the relationship between the two countries, Luo Ye could see that Lilian did not go all out in this battle. Instead, she used a battle of attrition to achieve victory. However, after this last match, the top 4 contestants of the Challengers Cup were officially decided. These 4 extraordinaires were about to compete for the honor of being at the top of the younger generation. But in Roha's eyes, this was especially strange because from his point of view, this was a match between siblings. Thus, under the gazes of everyone in the arena, the 4 of them began to draw lots for their fates. However, the results left the audience both happy and worried. Group 1. Group 2, when such a result appeared on the screen, the battle arena was in an uproar. The audience of Saint Maester cheered in surprise, cheering for Luo Ye's luck. The audience of the Theocracy was excited, as were the members of the Blue Rose faction and the supporters of Luo Ye. On the other side, the fans and students of the Austin Empire, as well as the audience who supported Williams, were somewhat worried. After all, no matter how they looked at it, the opponent who was also at the 3rd level of the source rank was a strong opponent. Before the final match, Lilian naturally did not want to fight with Luo Ye. On the other hand, the match with Lilian was exactly what Williams wanted. After all, she participated in the Challengers Cup to prove that she was stronger than the people around Luo Ye. The moment she passed by Luo Ye before leaving the arena, Lilian said so to him in an imperceptible voice. The young man smiled. After drawing lots to determine the number of matches, the 4 final contestants left the arena respectively. The battle arena was sent off with cheers and applause. Everyone knew that no matter who won or lost, they would definitely become the leaders of the younger generation. I'll be leaving first. Remember to bring the trophy with you when you come back. Chapter 396. Under the dim light of the butterfly dance pavilion, the reddish-brown-haired girl's emerald eyes narrowed slightly and a blush appeared on her delicate face. She stretched out her slender white hand and gently placed it on the boy's chest. Her fingers intertwined as she measured Luo Ye's chest. Is it itchy? Looking at the young lady who mistakenly thought that her actions had tickled the boy, Luo Ye turned his head and denied. Xia Luo raised her eyes and stared at the boy in front of her for a while. Suddenly, she narrowed her eyes as if she had understood something. Not only did she not retreat, she instead took a step forward. With a teasing smile on her face, the reddish-brown-haired girl once again stretched out her hand and pointed at the boy's chest. Inch by inch, she began to measure his chest, but this time, the young lady was no longer focused on measuring. Instead, she seemed to unintentionally lean on the boy's body. "What's wrong, dear?" The boy who didn't know what to say was silent for a moment. He could only turn his face away again, but he didn't expect Xia Luo's warm breath to suddenly hit his neck again. The boy who was complaining in his heart resisted the throbbing in his heart. On the other side, the reddish-brown-haired young lady was getting more and more excited. She observed Luo Ye's increasingly red cheeks and resisted the urge to laugh. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for this heart-stirring prank to be discovered. "Xia Luo, is this the way to measure your chest?" Looking at the young lady who was smiling in all seriousness, Luo Ye nodded with conviction and then said. The black-haired boy took a step forward and hooked Xia Luo's slender waist. Before the reddish-brown-haired girl could react, he approached her and began to breathe into the girl's small ear. The effect was extremely obvious. The girl who was suddenly attacked let out a short scream, but Luo Ye didn't stop. After enduring for a moment, Xia Luot had no choice but to open her mouth and beg for mercy. I was wrong, dear. Please forgive me," the reddish-brown-haired girl who was attacked cried out in alarm. However, the boy who was teased for a long time didn't buy it. Under this playfulness, Xia Luot's body became more and more limp, her cheeks flushed, and her breathing quickened until a sudden sound was heard. "Lord Xia Luot, what happened?" "Okay." After a bit of fooling around, Luoya's disappointment of losing the competition was much better. Seeing the young lady's happy face, Luo Ye's eyes, and then she reluctantly said goodbye to Luo Ye. Chapter 397. After the duel with Teresa, Luo Ye went off the stage to check his body according to the competition procedure. Another fierce battle began in the arena. But what the young man didn't expect was that when he returned to the stage after finishing all the checks, the arena was already in an uproar. Venue number 30. As a battle of spells, although the Challengers Cup added various secret realms in order to enrich the types of venues, the most basic arena still existed, which was this arena number 30. But one had to admit that even though the arena in the Leinster Battle Arena was relatively spacious compared to other places, it was still too small for the two of them right now. Although there would be spell protection around the arena, due to the spectators, in order to avoid major accidents, the rules stipulated that anyone who stepped out of the arena would be judged as the loser. Besides, Lillian wasn't the only one who stepped out of the arena, but her summoned creatures as well. The noisy shouting in the arena continued, and there was obviously a fierce debate on the side of the tournament organizer. The higher-ups of the Austin Empire strongly requested for a new venue for the sake of Her Royal Highness, which led to the match not starting yet. But after a long discussion, the tournament officials decided to uphold the original result of the draw. 1 second, remember. Antonio was at the top of the Extraordinaries, the long-established speaker of the Country of Scholars, and the headmaster of St. Freya Academy. His position in Shio was extremely high, and no one dared to challenge him, especially when his actions were completely in line with the rules of the tournament. In the arena, Lillian's Magician Legion was basically crippled, and the knights didn't have enough distance to charge, so the combat troops she chose to use were a small-scale, high-quality combination. William's tactic was even simpler, and that was to force Lillian to step out of the arena. In the arena, Williams began to attack without caring about the consumption of his spell power. The surging spell power turned into a tide of light through the skill of the Heart Sword, attacking Lillian endlessly on the opposite side of the arena. The final result was as expected. After the end of the match, the live audience who saw the result of the verdict began to talk about it. There were rare complaints about the competition. After all, in everyone's opinion, this match between 3 source-grade players should be the most exciting battle in the entire Challengers Cup. But now, it seemed that it wasn't even as satisfying as Luo Ye's match. Especially the audience from the Austin Empire, many of them were furious. The moment Lillian saw Luo Ye, she was taken aback and her stern expressions softened a little. After informing the staff around her, Her Royal Highness walked over to the young man with an apologetic look on her face. "No, this battle has nothing to do with senior sister's strength. It's because of the venue." Hearing Lillian's self-reproach, the young man fell silent. For a moment, he didn't know how to comfort the young lady. "Really, you really know how to find excuses for me," the black-haired young man said with a smile on his face. Lillian could not help but curl her lips as well. She closed her eyes and let out a long sigh of relief, before turning to the young man and reminding him. "Alright, I understand. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.